If you realized how powerful your mind was, you wouldn't say or think something you didn't want to be true. And because all thoughts become things. And it's not to say that if you have one bad negative thought, it's going to ruin your life any more than eating that donut we talked about would. But it's the consistency of it.
Yep.
Because our thoughts are that powerful. Our imagination is so powerful.
So here's the thing. Entrepreneurs, leaders, salespeople, we all want to create consistent, repeatable, and scalable ways to grow our business and our income. And we want to do it better, faster, and more seamlessly. Why? So we can actually enjoy our lives, take vacations, and spend the quality time that we want with the people that we love. How do we do all this without spending a fortune or running ourselves ragged? That's the big question, and this show is dedicated to the answer. Hey, thanks so much for checking out today's podcast. Today I'm talking to Jim Kwik. Now, if you know that name, you know that his story is absolutely fantastic and his insights are nothing shy of genius. This is a young boy or a young man who, when he was 5 years old, had a traumatic brain injury and spent the next 15, 16 years being known as the boy with a broken brain. Well, could you imagine being told that at 5 years old, you got a broken brain, and it took you 3 or 4 years to learn to read where all your peers had already had it down? And this guy has transformed himself from a broken brain to someone that movie stars, politicians, entrepreneurs, people come to him and they say, Jim, how can I improve my memory? Like, Jim can do seminars and memorize 100 people's names in the room. And in this interview, he tells you how. He's also the guy that if you want to speed read, you want to absorb more content, you want to learn faster, you want to retain that information and be able to pull it out in a moment's notice, which, by the way, makes you a fascinating individual to spend time with and a much more attractive salesperson and sales leader. So I'm super pumped. If you've never been exposed to this guy, you are in for an absolute treat. We went full form. We literally said to each other, hey, how much time? 45 minutes to an hour? And I think we finished at 2 hours. So buckle up, listen in, digest it in your own time, and welcome to my interview with Jim Kwik. Hey, Jim, thank you so much for joining us today. I am so grateful, so pumped. Rich is out of his mind, just so you know, over here. Like, Rich is like,
awesome.
We're getting Jim Kwik in the office on the podcast. So for the few people out there that don't have context for you, would you take a minute and just kind of like, who is Jim Kwik?
Yeah, Jim is really grateful to be here, first of all.
Oh, I love that. Thank
you're
you.
an incredible team. I love your energy, not only your vitality, but your presence.
Thank you.
I respect not only what you do, but the manner you do it. Jim is a former struggling student and who will work his butt off to be your brain coach.
Yeah.
Literally, for everyone listening, it's interesting when people see me live on stage, and I know it's familiar ground for you. I do these demonstrations. Mm-hmm. I just posted one on Instagram today where I'll memorize like a room full of people's names.
Yes.
Or the audience will give me some daunting list of words, 100 words, 100 numbers, and I'll memorize them forwards and backwards. But I always tell people, I don't do this to impress you. I really do this to express to you what's possible.
Exactly.
Because the truth is, like many people share, is that this is available to all of us. Mm-hmm. The challenge is we weren't taught.
Yes.
We weren't taught how to remember names, how to read faster, how to have better focus, how to think more clearly, how to solve problems.
Yes.
School was a great place to learn, as you know, what to learn, but not necessarily how to learn.
Exactly.
And I think if there's a skill to really get good at in the 21st century, it's our ability to learn faster, because the world is changing so fast. But the reason why I know it's available for all of us is because I grew up with learning difficulties. At the age of 5, I had an accident in kindergarten, writing class, a really bad fall.
Yeah.
And I had a traumatic brain injury, and I was never the same, my family said. Mm-hmm. I was put in special classes. Teachers would repeat themselves 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
I would pretend to understand, but I didn't really understand anything.
Yeah.
I had poor focus. My mind was everywhere. I had trouble remembering things. It took me an extra 3 years to learn how to read, which is really traumatic as a kid. When you remember those circles back in school, those reading circles where you'd pass around a book and you have to read out loud.
Yeah.
Every time that book got closer and closer and closer, I was just like
palms are sweaty,
It is.
stressing. I mean, that's
it's one of like,
yeah.
it was like, I think actually that's where a lot of fear of public speaking comes from, those reading circles.
Sure.
I mean, think about it. No one was really great at it, but
No.
we learned early on that, we're vulnerable and when all eyes are on you. So when the book came to me, I would actually just look at it and I would just stare at it. It felt like, eternity, and I would just pass the book on because those words didn't mean anything. At the age of 9, I remember in class, the teacher pointed to me in front of the whole class and said, "That's the boy with the broken brain." And, talk about negative thoughts. Parents have to be, adults, any adult, has to be very careful with their external words because they become a child's internal words.
Yep.
So I know we've talked about this negative chatter we have and the critic we have inside of our mind. We're not born, with those things inside there. We're a blank slate, but
Yep.
it got imprinted on me. And I remember how it manifested was every time I did badly on a quiz or a test, which was all the time, every time I wasn't picked for sports, which was all the time, I would say, it's because I have the broken brain. That became my inner dialogue. But when I turned 18, I wanted to make a fresh start. I was a freshman in college, and I wanted to show the world, show myself that I could really do it, make my parents proud. They had immigrated here. That story. We didn't speak the language. We lived in the back of a laundromat. Didn't have the money. Didn't have the education. Didn't have any kind of resources or anything like that, or know anybody. But so I want to make them proud, and I did worse. And I was ready to quit school because I didn't even have the money to be in school. And I thought there was just something wrong with me. And when I was ready to quit, a friend's like, "Hey, I'm going home this weekend to see my family. Why don't you come with and get some perspective?" And this word perspective, when we're talking about accelerated learning, I know we're going to talk about how to have focus and remember names and master your day. It's perspective. It helps have a different point of view when you change people, when you change place. And so I go, and the family is pretty well off. Father walks me around his property before dinner and asks me a simple question. And that's another thing, perspective, the power of questions. And he asked me a question, which was the worst question you could ask me at the time. He says, "Jim, how's school?" Which is like, I just start bawling because I have so much pent up pressure. And I tell him my whole broken brain story and how I was going to quit school and disappoint my parents. And I was really lost. And he's like, "Jim, well, why are you in school?" Another question, right? Mm-hmm. What do you want to be? What do you want to do? What do you want to have? What would you like to share? And honestly, Tom, I didn't have an answer because no one's ever asked me that question before.
Sure.
And it's interesting in our life when we ask a new question, we get new answers. And I go to answer him, and he pauses, and he reaches in the back pocket, and he takes out a notebook, and he takes out a couple of sheets, tears them out, and makes me write down my answer. And another principle of success is just writing these things down, right? Writing down our dreams and our goals. And I've never done that before. And when I'm done, I fold up the sheets to put in my pocket, and he grabs them out of my hands, and I'm freaking out because I wasn't expecting him to see. I mean, these are intimate things I've never even thought of myself or shared with anybody. And he's reading my darkest, deepest dreams, everything. And when I say darkest, but like hidden, these are the dreams I've never shared with anybody. And when he's done, he looks at me, he's like, "Jim, you are this close to everything on that list." And he spreads his index fingers about 8 inches, maybe a foot apart. And I'm like, "There's no way. Give me 10 lifetimes. I'm not going to crack that list."
Yeah.
And then you'd appreciate this, Tom. He goes like this. He puts his fingers to the sides of my head, meaning what's in between is really the bridge or the key. And he takes me into a room of his home that I've never seen before. You would love it. It's ceiling to floor, wall to wall, covered in books.
Yeah.
Like I've never seen a library in somebody's house before.
Yes.
And keep in mind, I've never finished a book cover to cover. I'm phobic of like, it's like walking to a room.
From an early day, of
right,
course,
exactly.
Right?
I was traumatized,
yes.
and like a lot of us, we're struggling. We don't know why we're struggling in certain ways, why we don't make the calls, or we procrastinate, or we self-sabotage. But for me, it's like walking into a room full of snakes because I'm so scared of it.
Sure.
And he starts, what makes it worse, he starts going to the shelves and starts grabbing these snakes and handing them to me. And I'm looking at these titles, and you'd appreciate these. This is biographies of some incredible men and women in history, and a lot, what we're talking before this interview, a lot of that real, like the golden era of, like the Napoleon Hill and Dale Carnegie,
of course,
and Norman Vincent Peale, right?
Yes.
And so I was. He says, Jim, I want you to read one book a week, and I'm like, are you kidding me? How's that? Have you not listened? Like, I'm fighting for my story.
Don't you know I have a broken brain?
Exactly. I'm like, and I always tell people, because people come to me all the time, they're like, Jim, I have a horrible memory, or Jim, I'm getting too old, or Jim, I'm not smart enough. And I always tell people, if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them, right? If you argue for your limits, they're yours.
Yes.
And I'm arguing for my story, and I want to
sure.
and I'm fighting for what I can't do. And he's like, I was like, and I say, I can't even do this because I can't even keep up with my schoolwork. And he looks at me, he's like, Jim, don't let school get in the way of your education. And this was over 25 plus years ago. So I didn't realize it was a Mark Twain quote at that time.
Yeah.
But he's like, I was like, that makes sense. And then I came back, I was like, still, I can't, if I commit to it, I'm going to do it, and I cannot do it. And very smart man, he reaches into his pocket, and what does he pull out? He pulls out my bucket list. And he starts, I get like goosebumps. I call them truth bumps. He starts reading my bucket list out loud.
Yeah.
And when you hear, it's so weird. Like, it's hard to describe, but when I started hearing my goals, my dreams, my fantasies in some other person's voice incanted out in the universe, it messed with my mind, my heart, my spirit, something fierce.
What was the reaction?
The reaction
for you?
For me. Yeah, it was like I was hearing, like, I've never even verbalized my own goals before, because I didn't have that. I didn't know where I was going or who I was, and what I need to be able to, who I need to be that person. But when I heard those things, it really, a lot of the things on that list, when I think about it, were things I wanted to do for my parents, things that they could never afford, or they would never, even if they could, they wouldn't do for themselves. And with that motivation or that leverage, call it what you want, I think it's important in learning, why, going back to purpose,
yes,
and being clear about that. And I was never in my life, but hearing those things, I agree to read one book a week because I wanted to help my family. And then now, fast forward, I'm sitting back at school, and I'm sitting at my desk, and I have a pile of books I have to read for midterms, and then a pile of books I promised to read. And I already couldn't do anything with that one pile. And so what do? Where do I have the time? I don't eat, I don't sleep, I don't work out, I don't spend time with friends, I don't do anything that's good for me. I just live in the library, and it's not very sustainable, right? No. I'm just like wasting away. And one night, late at night, I ended up passing out of sheer exhaustion, and I fell down a flight of stairs, and I hit my head again. And I woke up 2 days later, Tom, in the hospital. And I don't know if anyone's had this experience where they just blacked out or passed out, but I woke up and I didn't even know where I was, and I thought I died. And maybe part of me, wished because I didn't know, like, everything was hard in my life. I thought it was unfair. I would work 3 times harder than, it's not like I was lazy. I would work, but I wasn't getting the results everybody else was getting. And the questions I was asking was not very empowering. It was like, why am I so, stupid, and why am I so slow, and all these things. And I would come up with those answers, which weren't very empowering. But I woke up in the hospital bed. I lost all this. I was down 117 pounds. I mean, I was like when I say wasting away, I was hooked up to all these IVs. It's dehydrated. And I thought there has to be a better way. And when I had that thought, the nurse came in at that exact moment and brought me a mug of tea. And on the teacup was a picture of Albert Einstein, like a genius, right? The opposite of what I thought I was. And it had one of his quotes, and we've all heard it in different iterations, in different forms, but basically it said, the same level of thinking that's created your problem won't solve your problem. And again, it made me ask a new question. I was like, what's my problem? And I was like, my problem really is I'm a very slow learner. And I was like, okay, how do I think differently about it? I was like, well, maybe I could learn how to, learn faster or learn better. And I asked that new question. And I was like, well, how do I do that? And I was like, oh, school. So I asked the nurse for a course bulletin for next semester's classes, and I look at all the classes, and they're all classes, again, on what to learn and what to think, but not how to learn and how to think.
Yeah.
Math, history, science. I mean, important classes, but not classes on how to study, how to listen, how to be able to have empathy and social intelligence and connect with somebody and, process information, take notes, all that stuff. And so I put my studies aside, because that wasn't doing very much good anyway. And I just started studying this active studying. Like I wanted to solve this riddle, this puzzle. How does my brain work so I can work my brain? How does memory work so I can work my memory?
Say that first question one more time.
Yeah.
I think that's so, I mean, that's...
It's wild, right? Because we live in an age where everyone who's listening or watching, none of us are paid completely for our brute strength. It's our brain strength.
Yes.
Right? Nobody is paid for their muscle power today. Maybe in agricultural, industrial age, but it's not our muscle power, it's our mind power.
Yes.
Right? And the faster you can learn, the faster you can earn, because knowledge is not only power, it's profit.
Yes.
Right. And I don't just mean financial profit. That's obvious, right? But I mean all the treasures of our life. And so I wanted to solve this riddle of how does my brain work so I can work my brain better? Because our brain is our most valuable wealth creating asset, period. Right. And yet it doesn't come with an owner's manual.
No.
Right. And it's not necessarily user friendly.
No.
And in today's day and age, especially the age we live in, we're all struggling with these metaphorical supervillains. We have digital overload, too much information, too little time. Like we're drowning in it, taking a sip of water out of a fire hose, right? Second thing, I think a lot of entrepreneurs or listeners could relate to is not only digital overload, but there's digital distraction.
100%.
I mean, we cannot maintain our focus in a conversation, or you'll read a page in a book, get to the end and just forget what you just read, or you'll meet somebody, get their name, and the name just disappears because we have no focus or attention. And then after digital overload, digital distraction, there's this thing called digital dementia. I mean, have you heard this new term? It's in healthcare. It's basically where we're so dependent and reliant on our smart devices. It keeps our calendars. It shows our to-do list. It does simple math for us. It keeps all our phone numbers. I mean, it just goes on and on and on.
Siri, how do I
exactly
YouTube the?
And so exactly,
yes.
and our mutual friend Dr. Daniel Amen, Change Your Brain, Change Your Life, the brain doctor. He's like, Jim, the invention of GPS. If you're dependent on a piece of technology to tell you when and where to turn, you're not going to doctors to get checked out when you would have memory lapse.
Yeah.
That's digital dementia. It's like your brain is like a muscle, but it's use it or lose it. But we're using, our smart devices is doing a lot of that for us. It's not that I want to memorize 500 phone numbers, but we've lost the ability to remember one.
Yes.
We've lost the ability to remember a conversation. We've lost the ability to remember what we're going to say or what hotel room number we're in. And those kind of memory lapses, I believe in business especially, I think two of the most costly words in business are I forgot. I forgot to do it. I forgot to bring it. I forgot what I was going to say. I forgot my speech. I forgot that meeting. I forgot that name. I mean, it just goes on and on and on.
Okay. Every listener right now is going, okay, Jim, are you going to help me solve these things? Because you just basically exposed every problem that the listeners everybody deals with this stuff right now.
And these are the things that are holding us back that we don't realize are taking energy away from us, taking our focus away, taking our productivity. It's stealing like our profit all the time. And so,
but it's not just our profit, it's our joy, it's our happiness, it's being in the moment, it's having eye contact with someone, it's connecting with their spouse, with their prospect, with their friends. Like I carry my phone because I need it.
Right.
Right. But like, I don't look at it in the morning. Like I do my thing in the morning, then I start my day. Right. Like it's like, and most people are like, oh, I couldn't even imagine doing that.
Right.
Right. Like they pick up their phone. It's like, okay, start the day. Here we go. Right. So I'm jumping ahead.
No. I'm jumping ahead. I love that because it's.
So how do we help? Okay. Actually, no. Yeah. You got to finish.
Okay, so
how did you finally solve this?
Yeah. So here's the thing. I started with a question.
Yeah.
We're talking about fundamental principles.
Yes.
Of elite performance, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about perspective. We're talking about the power questions. We're talking about with that bucket list, understanding our motivation, like what our values are.
Yep.
And then when we're thinking about. So for me, I was asking this question, how does my brain work? And so I can work my brain. So I set my studies aside and I really started studying this thing called meta learning. Meta learning is like the science of learning how to learn.
Yes.
And I think it's the one thing we should all been taught back in school because it's just the world is changing so fast. And you always have to retool and rethink and it's so competitive. And how do you catch up, keep up, get ahead nowadays? Yeah. And so I started studying adult learning theory, multiple intelligence theory. I started studying, it wasn't just the latest neuroscience, which I'm really excited about, neurogenesis, neuroplasticity, all our ability to create new brain cells and new connections. But it was also not only the newest, most modern, studies out of these great Ivy League schools. It was also like the ancients. Like, what did people do before there were there was smart smartphone. Like what did they do before they had was a printing press?
Yes.
Like how did they pass on historical information through generations around campfires? And so I started studying the ancient Greeks. Like what did those poets do to be able 2,500 years ago? What did ancient civilizations do? Native Americans, how did they remember things? And so my goal, after I started learning this, I started studying speed reading and mnemonics. I started training with magicians. I mean, I really wanted to pull from a whole gestalt of different methodologies and trainings. And about 60 days into it, Tom, a light switch just flipped on, and I started to understand things, like really for what I felt like the first time.
Yeah.
I started to have better focus. I started to process information, and not only process it, but retain it, and also apply it. What a concept. I believe the biggest lie in the personal develop in an industry or any performance training is this thing that we grew up with learning, saying that says knowledge is power, right? It's not completely accurate, because knowledge in itself is not power. It has the potential to be power, but it only becomes power when we apply it.
Applied knowledge.
And people think that if they just buy a book or a course or whatever, because the truth is all the books, podcasts, videos, coaching programs, none of it works unless we work.
Bingo.
Right. And then it sits on the shelf and it becomes shelf help and not self-help. And people think they get points, just for getting all those books.
I have to write that down. That's just so classic.
But it's true. I mean, it's one of those things. And I know we're going to go into the tactics right now. My challenge for everyone listening is learning is not a spectator sport.
No.
You got to get off the bench. You got to do the work, And so if knowing, there's this cartoon, G.I. Joe, it always end with knowing is half the battle. But if knowing is half the battle, the other half is applying an action.
Yeah.
And so my challenge for everyone listening is to ask yourself, how can I use this? And there's 3 questions, because we're talking about questions are the answer. To take knowledge and put it into action. I just did this, a podcast episode on this. I ask yourself, train yourself relentlessly to ask these 3 questions. Number 1, how can I use this? So this is dealing with your head, right?
Yep.
This is your creative juice, like how you learn something, which we're going to talk about how to remember names, how to learn faster.
Yep.
Ask yourself, how can I use this? The second thing I would ask yourself is going from your head into your heart. Why must I use this?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, they know what to do, but they don't do what they know, because common sense, as we talked about, is not common practice. And so, like, why must I use this? And this is the drive, right? This is your values, and this is what's going to get you up. Like, who's counting on you? I listened to your recent podcast. Like, who's counting on you to like be your best version of yourself? That superhero version of yourself, right? Like, so that's your why, which is the second H, which is the heart. And then when you go from there to your hands, head, heart, hands, which is really the implementation. You're right. Really, where you're going from information to inspiration to implementation. The third question you ask is, after you ask, how can I use this? Why must I use this? Is when will I use this? Obsessively ask, when will I? I think one of the most downplayed, like the most powerful productivity performance tool we have is our calendar. Yeah. But most people, they'll schedule their doctor's appointments or client appointments or investor meetings, but they'll never schedule the things that their workouts, their journaling, their meditation, right? All the other personal growth that they have to be able to do, because in order for your business to grow, your income to grow, we need to grow, right, at the source. And so ask yourself, when will I use this? So how can I use this? Why must I use this? And then when will I use this? And unless it's in your calendar, it's not going to happen, right? It's just not.
Has he been listening to my podcast? So the cornerstone of what I talk about is if it's not in your schedule, it doesn't exist.
I love that so much.
I mean, that's it. So I got to back up just for a second, because when you have that moment, I felt like a mutual friend, Tom Bilyeu, right? Like it's Neo in the Matrix when he finally realizes, I can jump, I can fly, I can stop bullets. Like you had that moment, but you earned that moment because you did the work. Yeah. Can you speak to that? Because I think people we want that, like that aha moment, like right. But if I don't do the work, the aha doesn't show up. Yeah. You know what I mean? The true life-changing aha. Can you speak to that? Yeah, I can.
When I said there's 3 I's, you have information, which most people have in their head. They have inspiration to use that. And this is why I love your show, because it has both, right? You inspire people, but just if somebody just inspired all the time, people be motivated but not know what to do. And if you just instruct all the time, people have a lot of information, but they're not inspired to use it. So you need a balance and a blend. So you have the information in your head, you have the inspiration in your heart, and then you have the implementation in your hands. And when you have those three eyes, I feel like then you could go to the fourth eye, which is really the goal for me, is integration.
Yeah.
Where it becomes you. It's who you are.
Yes.
And during those 60 days of studying meta learning and speed reading and mnemonics and adult learning theory and neuroscience, there was a point where it just integrated. And I just, where I realized where I had this like power where I could stop bullets. I was in a huge lecture center. I don't talk about this, but I was in a huge lecture center, still freshman year, there's a few hundred people there. And back then, there's no internet. I don't want to date myself, but remember those like overhead projectors, and you had to like kind of roll them out, and so the teacher was putting notes on there, for everyone to watch, look at and take notes. And the professor put something on there, and a handful of seconds later, I start laughing out loud. Now we talk about superpowers a lot, and the reason why I talk about superheroes a lot is because I couldn't read, but I taught myself how to read by reading comic books.
Yeah. Something
Something about the illustrations, the story, good versus evil, hero's journey brought the words to life, and that's how I learned how to read. And
you also got intent behind the words.
Yes, very
Do you know
much
what I mean?
so.
When you see the anger, the smile, the pow, you get
Absolutely.
the intention behind the words, which adds so much. It makes it easier to read.
It does.
Makes it easier to learn.
Completely.
Yeah.
And I really think, when we're talking, I know we're going to talk about accelerated learning, using all of that makes a difference, using all your senses and understanding drive and motivation. And so he puts a slide on the projector, and a few seconds later, I just start laughing, because growing up, my superpower was really being invisible. Because when you define yourself as the boy with the broken brain, and I don't think it came from this teacher's malintent. I just feel, I don't feel like it was. So I own that, but I didn't want the attention. I don't want to be seen or heard. Maybe I do deep down, but I didn't want the spotlight. And so, but I laugh out loud, and people look and they see me, and they probably never paid attention to me in the whole school year. And then people are like looking at me weirdly. And then about 15, 20 seconds, 30 seconds later, there was this ripple where everyone else started laughing. And what we're laughing at was this slide. It was like a riddle joke that he put on there. But because I had these quote unquote superpowers that I was developing, I read it and processed it really fast, and that's when I realized, I was like, wow, I could, just like Neo stopping bullets kind of thing.
Yes.
And so when I got to 60 days into it, my grades just skyrocketed, and not only my grades, but my life. You know what I mean? That was this was the one thing that was my kryptonite that was holding me back, my Achilles heel. And when I had that moment, I was cheering and happy for myself, but I was also upset. I was really angry.
Why?
Because I suffered and struggled for a decade and a half. My whole academic school, elementary school, middle school, junior high school, it was like it was always on me. It was always not even just the elephant in the room. The elephant was like on my shoulders, that I was just disabled or challenged and everything, and it affected every area of my life. And I was upset that there were simple ideas, tools, techniques, capabilities I could have learned that would have made this so much easier. Yeah. And it made me did not even understand why they didn't teach just in school how to learn. And so I started to help friends, and I started to tutor, because that was like my mission, right? Because I couldn't keep this to myself.
Anger into positive action. Right?
Exactly. Because I believe that if you learn, and then from your learn you earn, then you have to return.
Yes.
And then so I was getting all this benefit, but shame on me if I know something that could help somebody who's suffering like I did all those years, my entire life, practically, and I don't share it with people. And so I started tutoring, and one of my very first students, she was a freshman, and she's in college. She read 30 books in 30 days.
Wow.
Now, Tom, we're
not talking like the old,
I'm not talking like Cliff Notes. I'm not talking about skimming,
Yeah.
Like traditional speed reading has long been associated with skimming words, getting a gist. Yeah. And, that's not, like, I train world leaders and CEOs of major companies and the best doctors at the Cleveland Clinic and all, it's
people that need to take in a
Right.
tremendous amount
Like,
of
you don't-
content to have context to make a good
you don't
decision.
want your
right?
you don't want your doctor to get the gist of what she's reading.
No.
Right. And so
No.
I train people to read, but so this young lady read 30 books in 30 days and really absorbed it. And I wanted to find out, I believe genius leaves clues, that if somebody's successful, genius is completely trainable.
Yes.
Right. And they're doing other things. So when I do things on stage, and I read a book a day and I do these kind of mental feats, there's always a method behind what looks like magic.
Yes.
If somebody's an incredible salesperson, there's a method.
Always.
Whether that person's conscious of it or not,
Yep.
there's doing something other people aren't doing,
Yes.
right? And so you follow that recipe, get the same kind of results. And so I didn't want to find out how she read 30 books in 30. I know exactly how she did because I taught her. I wanted to find out why.
Yes.
Because
Motive matters.
Yeah, it does. Intent,
Yes.
motive matters. Like I was doing this training a little while ago in Silicon Valley, and when I was done, Bill Gates comes up to me and I was like, if you could have any one superpower, what would it be? And he was like, Jim, the ability to read faster.
Yes.
Leaders are readers. And Warren Buffett was like, I probably wasted 10 years of my life reading slowly. He reads 500 pages a day, still. I mean, leaders are readers.
And we're talking about trying to get people just to read 10
I
pages
know,
of a good book a day.
I know. And that's the thing. And so we like to, and so, but I want to, after I asked him that about his superpower, we started talking about the future of education. And Bill was like talking about it from technology. Now that classrooms don't have four walls, like people are watching this all around the world,
Yes.
right? And learning. And I was talking about from a theory, adult learning theory, meta learning. And so this group that was gathering around listening to this conversation, they were like, you have the tools and you have the theory. Is there anything missing to change education? And we talked about it some more and we came up with the same conclusion: motivation.
Yeah.
Like understanding human motivation, what drives people to do what they do. Why do they work out? Why do they not work out? Why do they procrastinate? Why do they buy? Why do they do anything? Right.
Yes.
And so, so I wanted to find out this young lady's motivation, and I find out that her mother was dying of terminal cancer and was given 2 months to live, 60 days. And the books she was reading were books on health and wellness and alternative medicine, everything, because she was determined to save her mom's life. That's a lot of drive. Going back to like why I read through, was reading, killing myself reading a book a week was just how do I help my family, right? And so I understood. I was like, wow, said prayers, good luck with that. 6 months goes by, I don't hear from her. All of a sudden I get a call from this young lady and she's crying and she's crying and crying. She just won't stop. And when she's done, like I find out they're tears of joy that her mother not only survived, but is really getting better. Doctors don't know how, they don't know why.
Yep.
They called it a miracle, but her mother attributed 100% to the advice she got from her daughter, who learned it from all these books. And at that moment, that's when I realized that if knowledge is power, then learning is our superpower. That if knowledge is power, learning is our superpower. Read the ability to read faster, be able to focus, be
Say
able
it
to
2
remember.
more times.
Yeah. If knowledge is power, learning is your superpower. And it's a superpower we all have inside of us. I always tell people that your life is like an egg, that if an egg is broken by an outside force, life ends. But if it's broken by an inside force, life begins. And all great things begin on the inside. And everyone listening to this, watching this, you have greatness inside of you. You have genius inside of you. And I love this conversation because it's all about how do you let it out? And if you're struggling, you're suffering, you're overloaded with all these, it's not completely your fault because we weren't taught. We weren't prepared. We live in a world of autonomous electric cars and spaceships that are going to Mars, but our vehicle of choice when it comes to learning and education, it's like a horse and buggy.
Yep.
They say of Rip Van Winkle, the guy who slept for decades, if he woke up today, the only thing he would recognize in our world are our schools. And this is not a slight against teachers. My mother became a school teacher because she didn't know how to help me, special education teacher. It's just because teachers are some of the most committed, caring, compassionate individuals that I know, but it's a system issue. The system hasn't changed as much.
It's
And so-
$5.7 trillion of the GDP of the U.S. and $1.2 trillion is on education.
Yeah.
Think about how pathetic that is.
Yeah. And so, it's whoever's listening to this, that's why we're such big advocates on self-education and self-empowerment. And,
Yes.
but the purpose of education and self-growth is not learning just for learning's sake. It's for application. And I feel like when people understand why they're learning something, they're more likely to retain it and use it. And so when that happened, I just found my mission, because I wanted, my goal is really, because I grew up with a broken brain when we're talking about my purpose. My purpose really is to make better, brighter brains, to light them up. They say we use a very small percentage of our potential. We use all our brain, but in terms of its potential and its efficiency and effectiveness is very different. And so my goal is no brain left behind. That's my purpose for being here. I've done this for over 25 years, and I'll be doing it the next 25 years. And, I just want everyone who's listening, if there's an opportunity, get one insight, one idea, just to be able to have positive impact on your brain, because your brain controls everything.
Yes.
And that's really my goal. And
so let's, first of all, we could end right now, and there's a lot of value just in that conversation, right? I mean, we all hear stories of other people's issues and how they overcome them, and it inspires us, right? To say, me too, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, he did it, she did it, I can do it too. The thing that I wrote down, it's so funny, we had all these questions, and I'm like, forget all that stuff. I want to talk brain optimization, right?
Yeah.
How do I intensify my superpower?
Let's do this.
I want to talk about specifically the elimination of ants, which I know falls under brain opt, but I want to separate that and really hit it hard. Yeah. And then I want to get some super learning tips around memory, retention,
remembering names,
right? Remembering names, which every one of these clients needs.
Of course.
So you pick which one do you want to attack
let's
first?
Let's go into this. All right, so
brain optimization.
Let's do it. Yeah.
So give me like, what are 5 things I should do? And I know I've watched 10 ways to do it. But give me like the top 5.
Yeah, I will. And so this is, and I love this format. So let's turn this into a little master class. So everyone who's listening, you're listening to as you're driving, you're at the gym, or you're listening at night, whatever it is, as best you can, take notes on this,
please,
because everyone knows there's a learning curve, but there's also a forgetting curve. Yeah. They say the science is saying that within 2 days, 48 hours, we lose 80% of everything that we learn, because learning is remembering. Socrates said that, but we're not taught. It should have been the 4th hour back in school: reading, writing, arithmetic, and remembering, retention. So here's some of the most powerful keys to really optimize your brain. And again, this is your wealth. This is your wealth tool. More people upgrade their phones. I mean, think about how often you upgrade your phones.
I love this metaphor.
Your operating system, on your computer. You get all these updates, but when are people updating their brains?
Some people's brains are running on DOS right now.
I know, right? And they feel it because they feel slow compared to where the world is.
Of course.
And so everything here is meant to. You don't have to work harder. I mean, working hard is definitely a big part of it, but you want to be, like sharpen the saw, Stephen Covey.
That's right.
You want to work smart, and so the essence of this is, all right, number 1, a good brain diet. All right, let's start with the food that you eat.
Yep.
Because what you eat matters, especially for your gray matter. And so this is in an area that most people aren't familiar with. It's called neuronutrition. And I did 3 shows on this. And neuronutrition is because your brain actually requires different nutrients than the rest of your body.
Yep.
And most people are not feeding their brain, and they wonder why they have brain fog. They wonder why they're slow to think. They wonder why their reaction time is, not what it needs to be. And so some of my favorite brain foods, I'll just give you some. And I recommend everybody talks to their functional medicine doctor.
Get your blood work done.
Exactly. See nutrient profile.
Exactly.
And then also, your biome. Maybe certain foods that you're eating could be creating the challenges that you're having.
Yes.
And people don't know, because that's your gut is your second brain.
Yes.
And there's a huge connection between the two. And so do that. But as in general, the genius, brain foods, you have avocados, right? The good fats. You have blueberries.
Yeah.
I call them brain berries.
Yeah.
And those antioxidants are very neuroprotective. You have broccoli, which also has high levels of fiber also as well. Olive oil, which I love. Olive oil. After that, if your diet allows, eggs are very, very, very powerful. Green leafy vegetables, very good. And I would, when I'm going through this, like you can make your grocery list for next time you go to your grocery store, you go food shopping. These are your super brain foods, if you will. But also rate yourself on a scale of 0 to 10 when I talk about these 5 things. How well are we doing? So from there, you have I would say number 7 is wild salmon, if your diet allows. Sardines are really good. Caviar is extraordinary, very high in DHA, the omega-3s that are very important. From there, I would say turmeric, the spice, that golden. I make in the morning, sometimes I'll make this golden milk, which has like turmeric, pepper, which helps you absorb it about 500% better, a little bit of honey and some almond milk heated. It's wonderful. It lowers inflammation. And really, inflammation is the name of the game, because you want to balance out the inflammation in your body, because that leads to a lot of challenges and degenerative diseases. And then from there, I would say walnuts are really good.
Yep.
Walnuts and almonds. Notice a walnut also looks like a human brain.
Exactly.
Which is
My wife
wild.
just said that same thing. She goes,
That's
I'm
interesting.
eating little brains.
Exactly.
Right.
And so you're eating, it's interesting also that the brain I don't want to get meta here, but it's the brain named itself, which is kind of interesting also as well. But there's certain foods that actually look like the organ it's serving.
Yes.
And I don't know if this is science, but it's definitely a good mnemonic memory strategy. Like, for example, you cut a carrot and it looks like the human eye. Mm-hmm. And carrots are good for your eyes. You cut a tomato and it looks like it has 4 chambers like the human heart. Yep. And so certain foods, so you can remember that really easily, because walnuts look like human brains. And finally, another one, dark chocolate.
Yeah.
What's good for generally for your mood? It has to be dark chocolate, not milk chocolate.
Yeah.
Tends to be good
And
for your mind.
probably not a
also
Snicker
as well.
bar, in case you guys are wondering.
Yeah.
In case you're wondering.
So those are good brain diet. And
So flip it. First of all, I got to just say, right?
Yeah.
So here's my breakfast every day: 2 eggs. Right. So I do take my pan out. I put ghee butter in.
Oh, good.
Right. Then I throw like the biggest handful of spinach in it. Right. I throw broccoli on top.
Wow.
Then I do 2 eggs. I open up a can of olive oil sardines.
Yeah.
Put the olive oil in my dog food. Right. So my dog is just in seventh
my
heaven.
goodness.
Put the balance in. Right. And then cook it up and put a half an avocado on top.
I love that so much.
Right. And
Dude,
I take that photo and people are like, sardines. And I'm like, I'll just hashtag brain food, hashtag brain food,
Exactly.
hashtag brain food. Right.
Exactly. And because people wonder when they have challenges with it. I could see what we're talking about. We're talking about the hardware, and after this we could talk about the learning strategies, which is the software. But you can learn, I could teach somebody how to read 3 times faster or remember names. But if their hardware is not in line,
100%.
then what is it?
If the brain is foggy, it doesn't matter how much information you take in.
Exactly.
I do these conferences and I'm like, guys, maybe you shouldn't drink while we're at the conference. We're trying to improve our brains and move forward. And some people like a conference is a release for them. Right. They're away from their day to day. They're with their buddies and they party. And I'm like, this is not the time to be partying, right? And side note, flip it.
Yeah. 5
or 6 foods to avoid.
Yeah, this is so on the opposite side. What we're avoiding are processed foods.
Yep.
Generally things that
like fat food. Oh, they call it fast food, I think. Fat food is what I like
food,
to call
is that
it.
it.
Yeah, that's what I call it.
Yeah, I mean, the people call it pretty much the standard American diet, sad diet.
Exactly.
You want to avoid processed foods. Really, what's really bad are the processed oils.
Yeah.
Because that really messes. It's not only creating havoc on your heart, but whatever's good for your heart's going to be good for your head. And that's why exercise is, one of those 5 things. And so, yes, I believe that you should all have a to-do list, but that's also a not to-do list of the things. You say no to good, so you say yes to great, which checking your phone the first hour of the day. Mm-hmm. We've talked about that, but also the foods that you want to be able to avoid. Yeah. Because it'll just slow you down. And it's not that eating one donut is going to ruin your life, but it's the consistency.
It's the compound
of
effect.
That. Absolutely, because consistency compounds. And so that's the good brain. That's a good brain diet. Number 2, I would say, we already just mentioned it, exercise.
Yeah.
And it's so simple. Now notice that a coach doesn't always tell you something brand new, but talks to you about what you need to be doing. And you know this because it's common sense, but we're not doing it. Yeah. So on a scale of 0 to 10, how's everyone doing with their, not just exercise. I'm not just talking about going to the gym 3 times a week, because I'm talking about movement. Yeah. Because the primary reason we have a brain is to control our movement. That's the primary reason. And here's what science is showing us. It's not just a mind-body connection. There's a body-mind connection, that as the body moves, your brain grooves. As your body moves, your brain grooves. But here's the thing. You've all heard, we're all sitting behind these boxes 8 hours a day, and it's really tough because
sitting.
Yeah,
sitting is smoking.
Exactly.
Right.
Sitting is the new smoking. Sitting is the new smoking.
Yep.
And your body is meant to. And so, what I would recommend. So, what's the optimal time to be able to work, to be able to study? Science is suggesting it's about 25, 30 minutes. It's they call it the Pomodoro technique. That after about 25, 30 minutes, our focus and our attention, our concentration, there's a dip. And obviously when we start losing our focus and attention, we start losing the understanding and the retention, everything that comes after that. So this is cascade effect. And so what the Pomodoro technique is basically saying is take your phone and set an alarm to go off every 25, 30 minutes. And then when you hear it go off, you don't take a 30-minute break, you take a 5-minute break. And what do? You do deep breathing, right? Because your brain, see, this is the thing, your brain is only 2% of your body mass, but it requires 20% of the nutrients and oxygen. And so deep breathing, a lot of people, they have brain fog. And I'm talking to people listening to this, you're suffering, your thoughts aren't coming as clear as you want them. You're forgetting simple things. You don't have the mental energy. You're suffering from decision fatigue, right? You can't make a good decision. And part of it is we're just not oxygenating. And the reason why is like, when people read even, they get so tired. Yeah. They use reading as a sedative.
They get tense.
Exactly. And they count how many more pages they have left. It's not a pleasant process. And some of it is just their posture. When they're reading, they're like slumped down. And when you collapse your diaphragm, people don't realize this, but the lower 1/3 of your lungs absorbs 2/3 of the oxygen. And so you want to be able to keep your posture up. And so the challenge is most people aren't getting that oxygen. So deep breathing is one thing to do during the 5-minute break. Number two, I would say, hydrate, because going back to we're talking about good brain diet, water is just, if you just staying hydrated will improve your reaction time and your thinking 30%, just staying hydrated. But most people aren't hydrated because most
people are super dehydrated.
Absolutely.
No idea.
You could lose actually.
Coffee doesn't hydrate you, in case you guys are wondering.
It definitely does not. And then the first thing in the morning, I try get people just to drink water, because you could lose up to a pound of water through respiration and perspiration at night.
Do you recommend lemon water?
I love lemon water completely. And so I'll do that, or I'll add some apple cider vinegar into it, or I'll add some kind of like a little sea salt. But so water, and that's when I'll also have a whole morning routine. These 10 things I do every morning. Everybody has their own morning routine. Mine specifically are to jumpstart my brain. Yes. Get it in the right way. So drinking water, and that's when I take my probiotics, for my second brain, if you will. But going back to the third thing I do during my brain breaks, so a 5-minute brain break after a 25-minute study session or work session, I move, I hydrate, and then the last one is I move. And going back to exercise, as your body moves, your brain grooves. And so it's not just working out again 3 or 4 times a week in the gym, it's actually making it a practice, taking a little walk. I mean, there's the reasons why Steve Jobs, who we were talking about before this conversation, he would do these walking meetings, right? Creativity, your focus is so much better. You're grounded.
Walk in the building.
Yeah, instead of sitting down all the time, and that's it takes these kind of changes. But here's the thing: when it comes to your habits, we've all heard this. First, you create your habits, then your habits create you. You create your habits of meditation, of working out, of eating the best foods ever, and then those habits create you back. But it doesn't just create your habits; it's this meta level where you create the habit of showing up for yourself.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And it's not just your habits of behavior, it's your habits of thoughts, it's your habits of feeling. So instead of just having a to-do list and a not to-do list, well, how about a to-feel list? Like, what are 3 things I want to feel today?
Yeah.
What about a to-be list? Like, a lot of people get stressed out and they're in crisis mode and they go in fight or flight, which is not good for making good mental decisions, or, using your cognitive capacity when you're in fight or flight. Cortisol and adrenaline, literally chronic stress shuts down your brain. But what I would say is, like, what are we doing to be able to alleviate that stress and also be able to just get centered? Right. And I feel like a lot of times people are, I tweeted this out the other day, is just, we feel, maybe you're not burnt out or tired just because you're doing too much. Maybe you're doing too little of the things that matter.
Bingo.
The things that make us come alive, the things that spark our fire, if you will. And so movement is really key. And so not just isolated to times in the gym, but getting the habit of moving all the time, because as your body moves, your brain grooves. We're doing these weekly challenges on Instagram right now, where we're challenging people to do little things that like brushing your teeth with the opposite hand.
Yes.
Which is actually shown, like, think about it. When we have all these people taking pictures of themselves first thing in the morning with their opposite hand, brushing their teeth. But number one, it forces presence. So for those of you who have trouble remembering names, the art of memory is the art of attention and being present with somebody and really observing them and being with them. But a lot of people, they're always elsewhere. But if you're brushing your teeth with your opposite hand, you have to be present. And it also trains you also, on top of it, there's these cross laterals. When I'm saying as your body moves, your brain grooves, that using one half of your body actually stimulates the other half of your brain. Yep. And so that gives you mental exercise. And then the other reason I've had people brush their teeth with the opposite hand is not only does it make you present and focused, not only is it training your brain, your opposite side of your brain, but the third thing is getting used to doing difficult things. Like everybody, and this is why I love your work, because you do the deep work.
Yeah.
And most people are trying to avoid that. They want the pill, right? But they don't know it's not a pill, it's a process. And here's the thing, it's just how you do anything is how you do everything. And when you do get yourself to do difficult things, you build that grit or that resilience, whatever you want to call it, and so it shows up when you have to do that sales call.
Yeah.
When you have to have that unpleasant presentation, a presentation or that conversation with somebody, so you build that up. And so, but coming back to the power of movement. So number one, good brain diet. Number two, move, move, and even just brisk walk. And also when you're listening to podcasts like this, it's been shown that if you're walking when you're listening to it, or you're on an elliptical, you're doing something rhythmic, you're going to encode it better. So you're going to remember it better also as well. After that, man, narrow it down to 5, like what's going to
those
turn
first
the needle.
2 were big.
Yeah.
You and I both know if everybody just acts on
completely
eat the right food for your brain.
Yeah.
And then follow the movement pattern, right?
Yeah.
And I love the 25-minute work, then stop, hydrate.
No, but I have the other 5. Here are the other 3. Here we go. So after that, what I would say, what's going to move the needle, give you a force multiplier, like in the military, where the same amount of input gives you multiple outputs, is this what they call the focal point, or the lead domino, if you will. You hit that first domino and you have this ripple of cascading effect in the rest of your life positively. What I would say, another one is a positive peer group. Dude, like what's great for your brain, it's not just your neurological networks, it's your social networks. It has less to do with your biology, because here's the thing, this is the truth. Research is saying conservatively, people say, oh, I'm too old, or oh, this runs in my family genetically or whatever. Genetics and biology is only about 1/3 of that potential. 2/3 of it is what we're talking about now. It's your lifestyle, and we have direct influence. Now, some people believe with epigenetics that we have 100% influence on everything, on how our genes express itself, depending on that. Some people suggest that some of these genetic challenges, or like Alzheimer's, like that's like in our genetics loads the gun, but our lifestyle determines whether we fire it or not, right? And so that makes a big difference. So 1/3. So there's no such thing as a good or bad memory. There's just more of a trained memory and an untrained memory if you do the work. And so good brain diet. And then after that, movement. The third thing I would say, positive peer group, because who you spend time with is who you become. And we've all heard that before, that if you spend time with 9 broke people all the time, be careful, you're gonna be number 10, right? And the reason why, from neuroscience perspective, is you have these things called mirror neurons, and they're in your nervous system. These are your empathy, your imitation neurons. It's when you watch sports or you watch television or movie, you could feel what the character is feeling, and it's why kids also learn so well. They imitate you, right? Yes. And here's the thing. It's not your biological networks. It's like whether someone smokes or has a habit that disempowers them, it has more to do with your social, whether your friends do that. Yep. And so your mirror neurons, the reason why you become the people you spend time with and you have to be careful and protect yourself is because you start adopting and adapting their habits, their same behaviors, their same attitudes, their same thought patterns. 100%. And that's why
the world.
Exactly. And that's why we become those people. Yeah. And so I would say on the other side, and we all know this, we could be around, you could do all the great techniques, you eat the best food ever, you could be moving, but if you have some energy vampires in your life, and sometimes it's our family, sometimes it's our friends. People like, why are you reading all the time? Like, why are you going to all these conferences?
Why do you listen to all that stuff? Why do you have a coach?
Exactly.
You're doing fine.
Exactly. And part of it, I believe it could be sincere, but they could be sincerely wrong, right? Family could love you. They have some kind of secondary gain. They don't want to lose you. They don't want you to outgrow them. They don't want
crabs in a bucket, man.
Exactly.
They're like, don't cook too good.
Exactly.
Let me pull you right back down.
Or they don't want you to get hurt or whatever it is. Yeah. But it's because we give them the power to do so. And we could choose whether or not we do that. And we talk about expectations and other people's expectations of us. You could go broke buying to other people's expectations and opinions, right? Yep.
And you could become wealthy in the right peer group.
Exactly.
Wealthy health, mindset, relationships, empathy, abundance, money, the whole game.
All of it. And the reason why I believe if people are listening to this right now, you're amazing. And I don't say that to just puff you up. I say it because you're self-selecting, you're doing the work.
Exactly. You're listening.
Right.
You're staying aware.
Most people do not show up for stuff, period. And certainly most people don't take that information and play full out. But when you do what other people don't do, you could have a life that other people can't have, and that's what's reserved for you. And so I would say, going back to, other people's opinions, it's just like I spent a lot of time in senior centers. I lost my grandmother to Alzheimer's, and I don't just spend time in senior centers just to improve their memory. I help the caregivers and such, because things that I could do. But more, I love, first of all, the wisdom, because there's so much wisdom, and I believe we can learn something from anybody, especially people who've been on this planet, for longer than we have. And so I respect that. But when they're sharing these stories, it's also polishing off their memories too. But also you hear these things called regrets, and it's interesting because, the biggest regret people have, across everywhere is just they somehow lessened their life or didn't do certain things because of what other people would think.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that when we're taking our last breaths, none of other people's opinions, none of our fears, none of it matters. What matters is how we lived, how we learned, how we loved, and work backwards from that. Create your great day from that. Like, what are the 3 things that are most important to me, and how do I celebrate that? And what would have to happen today in order for me to come back? At night, somebody asked me how my day was, and I was like, I crushed it today. Today was awesome. Like, who's counting on you to play your A game right now?
Bingo.
And because when we're in that box, and then, our coffin, there's not a lot of room for possessions, but then everyone could have the cars and all the great, toys, but there's certainly not a lot of room in there for regret.
It's the poem, The Dash.
The dash.
The day you're born, the day you die, and that dash is all the memories and experiences you had.
Yeah.
Right. My son's turning 18 in a couple of days. I'm like, dude, do you want anything for your birthday? And he's like, just some more memories, Dad.
Yeah.
Right. There's like stuff is stuff. He's like, let's go jump out of an airplane or something. Like, let's just do something to experience life.
That's why, Tom, I really love, when people talk about memory, it's not just about remembering facts, figures, formulas. That's all amazing. You can remember all of the client information, be able to give, and then they feel like you care. It's amazing. But the 3 areas, it's not just mental intelligence, it's mental health and it's mental fitness.
Yes.
I want people to remember things that are most important, like 3 L's especially. Number 1, you got to remember your life, because if your life is worth living, it's worth remembering. But most people don't remember those moments. Most people don't remember what they had for breakfast.
No.
Right? And so I want people,
the 15 great things that have happened this year.
Exactly.
They have a tendency they remember the dragon that got, that killed them, or the deal that got away, or the anger in their relationship at the moment.
Yeah.
But I'm like, well, did you have any victories along the way? Like, well, yeah, I went to the gym every day and I lost 2 pounds and I feel better and I closed a bunch of deals. And I'm like, but which one's taking up all your mind power?
Exactly. I mean, what if you just every single day just wrote a little note to yourself, and at the end of the day, one little thing you're grateful for, and put it into a fish, a jar or something.
Oh, that's
at the end of the year, you have 365 things that you're just here's because gratitude. I did a whole Thanksgiving episode on how gratitude rewires your brain and 4 ways of getting into instant gratitude, and it's interesting because what you appreciate appreciates. Mm-hmm. So you do this thought experiment and just kind of close your eyes and just ask yourself, what if the only things in my life tomorrow, the only things I kept tomorrow are the things I express gratitude for today? That would get your priorities that would dial you in. Because here's the thing, we've all, I think gratitude is the ultimate emotion, because we've all won the lottery. Life, just the fact that we're
everyone
alive.
Listening right now.
Everyone, you won the lottery. If you're alive listening to this right now, you won the lottery already.
Yep.
And so there's this saying that says, gratitude is riches and complaint is poverty. It's when you feel great. A lot of people, they could have a lot of stuff, but if they don't feel like they're blessed and they're grateful for it, they don't have a lot. But there's a lot of people who don't have a lot of resources, but they're really grateful for things that they have, and they live with that vibrancy. And so I would love
tell me the 3 L's. Life.
Yeah. So first thing is remember your life. Yep. The second, is remembering your loved ones.
Yes.
Because those are the people that make life worth, those magic moments you share with the people that, the family and friends that are also family. Yeah. That become friends that become so close. They become your family, those moments. And then finally, the 3rd L are your lessons. Mm-hmm. Going back, a lot of people, we've all heard this phrase and we've all said it before, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Maybe it's not insanity. Maybe it's just a bad memory. You're repeating problems like you date the same kind of person, you eat the same kind of food, you eat you make the same financial mistakes
Yes.
all the time because you're not remembering the lessons.
Yeah.
And I would say remember your life, remember your loved ones, remember your lessons,
Yeah.
because mistakes, and you and I, we've talked about this a lot to our students. Mistakes. We make mistakes, and mistakes don't necessarily define us.
No.
What defines us how we respond
Yep.
to it. Are we owning it? Are we responsible for it? Are we
The meaning
not,
we associate to it.
exactly? Are we learning from them all? I always tell people when you make a mistake, because this is what keeps people from doing things. One of the things that keep people from procrastinating, that keeps them procrastinating, is they know what they're fearful what other people would say. And you look at a child and they'll fall 50, 100, 1,000 times before they learn how to be able to walk, but they don't give up, and they don't say, "Oh, okay, I'm not going to walk."
Yeah.
But what happens? We go through one course and we try a sales presentation, doesn't work, and we're like, "Okay, that's it." I don't want to look bad, and that keeps us. I do this training a lot here in Hollywood, helping actors speed read scripts and memorize their lines. And I remember I was Jim Carrey's, and I was helping him with the project, and we were in his kitchen making brain food, guacamole and everything else. And I asked him this question. I was like, going back to motivation, why do you do what you do? And he looks at me, he's like, Jim, I act like a complete fool on camera, so extreme, because I want people who are watching, I want to give them permission to be themselves.
Yes.
And he calls it, he wants to free people from the concerns of other people. And it's interesting because going back to the biggest regret people have is they're so concerned. And so we play small, and I always tell people, make mistakes, because it's a fear of making mistakes and looking bad. Make mistakes old. So mistakes, number one, O stands for own the mistake. Own it. Be responsible for it. Don't blame other people.
Mm-hmm.
If you could fix it, fix it. If you could apologize, if you hurt somebody,
Do
apologize for it. Own it. The L in old, I like acronyms, obviously. The L stands for learn from it, because that's what mistakes are there for, right? Mm-hmm. It's not. People always think failure is the opposite of success, but we know that failure is part of success. It's absolutely part of it. And part of it is when we make mistakes, we get feedback that allows us to change course, and we learn from it, and then we grow. So make sure you learn from that mistake. Well, and ask yourself, what are the lessons here? And then the D in old, once you own it, once you learn from it, the D is don't repeat them.
Yeah.
Because if you make a mistake once, it's a mistake. But if you make it again and again and again, it's a choice.
Yes.
Right? So that's why, exactly. So don't repeat them. Make sure and that's what I'm saying, going back to remember what you want to remember, your life, your loved ones, and your lessons, is when you learn a lesson, don't repeat it and use it to be able to help other people. So that's going back to positive peer groups. So number one, the 5 things, good brain diet. Number 2, move. Number 3, be conscious of who you spend time with. Because on the opposite side, if you're around people that inspire you, that are achieving, that are playing at a high level, because here's the thing.
It's the thermostat, man.
Right?
And that's
the metaphor, and that's the metaphor I live my life by.
Yes.
It's the difference between a thermometer and a thermostat. A thermometer on the wall just reacts to the environment.
Yes.
And that's a crappy life.
Yeah.
If you're just reacting all the time, and we as human beings, we react to the weather, we react to the economy. Sometimes we react to the politics, we react to how someone treats us.
Yeah.
But to the degree we're successful, and I don't just mean financially, I mean just happy and joyful, is to the degree we maintain agency.
Yes.
We have that sovereignty and that power, and that's a thermostat. A thermostat is different than a thermometer. A thermometer reacts to the environment. Thermostat
sets it.
It sets it. It sets a standard. It sets a goal. It sets a vision, and then the environment raises to be able to meet that. And that's why, if you're listening to this right now, I'm willing to bet you identify more with the thermostat than a thermometer, because you wouldn't be listening to how to be able to learn faster and improve your sales and be able to be a better, just human and more productive if you felt like you were just reacting to things. You are doing the work. And so I would say positive peer group is really important. And finally, the last 2 I would say to really optimize your brain, I'll say sleep.
Yes.
Because people don't realize this. From a cognitive standpoint, 3 reasons why you want to prioritize sleep. We all know how we feel the next day after we got a bad night's sleep, right? You can't think, you can't make good decisions, you can't focus. But when you sleep, 3 things that are important for your brain. Number 1, it consolidates short to long-term memory. So that's actually, if you have long-term memory issues, check in with your sleep. The second thing is, the reason why you want to sleep is it cleans out plaque. It cleans out plaque that leads to brain aging, degenerative kind of challenges that we have. And so that sewage system gets kicked on when we're sleeping. But the third reason you want to sleep, and this is kind of a fun one no one ever talks about, it's your dreams. And so part of my daily routine, the very first thing I do every morning is remember my dreams. Now, the reason why is because we'll spend about 20 years of our life sleeping, 3 to 5 years completely dreaming. And that's a lot of years. And here's the thing, what we know, what the latest brain science is saying is that if you're a student and you're learning all day, or you're an entrepreneur and you're solving problems, your brain doesn't shut off at night. If anything, in some ways, it's more active. And people don't realize that. And what is it active doing? It's actually not only consolidating short to long-term memory, but it's coming up with solutions and ideas. And people don't realize this, but so many inventions, works of art, literature, music came from dream states. Yep. So Mary Shelley came up with Frankenstein in her dream. Paul McCartney came up with the song Yesterday in his dream. Elias Howe created the sewing machine in his dream. A chemist came up with the periodic table in his dream. Jack Nicklaus, he was shooting about 75 and he didn't know what was going for extended period of time. And he had a dream one night and he changed his grip and he could see it and feel it. And the next day he shot 64. So like our dreams are very telling.
Do you know that Napoleon Hill came up with the title Think and Grow Rich from a dream?
Really?
But he intentionally activated it. He said to his unconscious mind, tonight is the night, tomorrow's the deadline. You will find me the perfect title for this book.
I just got goosebumps.
It was.
I literally have goosebumps.
I see it. I mean,
I call them truth bumps.
Yes.
Like that's amazing.
Yes. Right. But I think that's the missing thing is that most people don't recognize you can tell your brain, I want you to work on this tonight. Mm-hmm. I mean, for people like, how do you get up at 4:45 in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning? Like, how do you do that? I'm like, before I go to bed, I tell myself, I wake up at 4 a.m. alive, excited, and full of energy. I'm going to sleep well tonight. I'm going to have 4 deep REM cycles. You know what I mean? I'm telling myself that that's my evening shutdown, a little tea, chill, and then tell my brain what to do.
I love that.
Like, do you follow that philosophy?
I do.
Yeah.
When I wake up first thing in the morning, the first thing I do in my daily routine out of my 10 things is I remember my dreams.
Yeah.
But I did a whole episode on 6 different things you could do to remember your dreams. Mm-hmm. And the D stands for decide. Yes. Most people never make a decision. That's why most people don't remember names. They never decide, I'm going to remember that person's name.
Yes. It's important to me now.
It is, exactly. Yeah. And a real decision as opposed to like a preference or an interest. Oh, it'd be nice if I remember their names. But if you decided, and then the R, well, I won't go through it. The A actually is affirming, exactly what you're saying. Affirming the night before. That you're going to dream and you're going to have these kind of dreams and solve these kind of problems. It's amazing. People realize how powerful their mind was. It's incredible. So what I would say, prioritize sleep. And there's so many different sleep hacks out there. Like my friend, Dr. Michael Bruce is a sleep doctor and he talks about 5 different things on my show to be able to optimize your sleep. And it's number 1 through 5. Number 1 is one schedule, meaning always go to sleep ideally the same time and wake up at the same time. Even on the weekends, don't sleep in. Like literally keep on the one schedule. Number 2, no caffeine past 2 p.m. Number 3, no eating 3 hours before bedtime. Mm-hmm. Number 4, no working out within the last 4 hours before you sleep because you're stimulating yourself. And number 5 is give the sun a high five first thing in the morning. So when you wake up, ideally watch the sun come up because it balances out your circadian rhythm.
The circadian rhythm. I was just in this conversation with a buddy of mine yesterday who he's so into this that he now wakes up to the sunrise and now he lives in Portland and he says basically as the sun goes down at 7:30, he said, we turn all the lights off in the house and we light candles.
Amazing.
And he's like, and we go to sleep, we walk around, you blow out all the candles. And he's like, and we go to sleep at 9 o'clock. He wakes up at, 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning every day. And he's following the circadian rhythm, right?
It's extremely powerful.
And this guy is a genius brander, marketing guy, like super out of the box.
And that's what I'm saying. Genius leaves clues. No matter what your area of genius is, if it's art, it's technology, it's fashion, what have you, as a journalist, whatever it is, it's just they're patterns.
Yeah.
And that's really what genius for me is pattern recognition and seeing, in sales, you see things other people just don't see.
Yes.
And then when you point them out, it's like, oh, now I see that. And then you can never look at it the same way or act the same way around it.
All of our clients listen to this. We talk about R&D, right? In the traditional corporate America, they're like, oh, you mean like, I'm like, no. Rip off and duplicate. Right. Rip off, find the patterns that are working.
Right.
We say run plays that work and stop doing dumb shit.
Right,
Like
exactly.
run plays that work, fine. Like Jim runs a play, it works. He's super healthy. He's got a great life. He's got a, I'm going to run that play.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? Like over and over and over, and get used to that, used to running plays that work.
And that's the fastest way to accelerate is to have a mentor, have a coach to be able to be able to guide us through that process. And so sleep, optimize it. And then the other thing, so we're always talking about to do, what not to do, the foods to eat and the foods not to eat and everything else. What I would say is for this is don't look at screens late at night.
Yes.
Because the blue light that's emitted off of a laptop, off of an iPad, off of your phones, it tricks your brain into thinking it's still daylight, and you cease the production of melatonin, which helps you to relax and be able to fall asleep. Or if you're going to do those things, like use Flux or Iris or something that pulls the blue light out of there.
Go to the black and white screen.
Exactly. Yep. Or wear the blue blocking glasses or something like that. And so all those things are really important. So what I would say is, so that's number 4.
What's 5?
What's number 5?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the one we were going to transition that you mentioned. Let's talk about killing ants.
Yes.
Perfect. Automatic negative thoughts. And that's a term by our mutual friend, Dr. Daniel Amen.
Yep.
So killing ants is clinically proven to be good for your brain. And ants.
So say it again. What's an ant again?
Automatic negative thoughts. And so this is that critic inside that was just like, I have the broken brain. I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough.
Yep.
And the reason again is if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. I believe my last name really is Kwik. I didn't change it to do what I do. My father's name was Kwik. My grandfather's name was Kwik. My life was pretty much planned out. I have to be careful when I'm driving because you don't want to get pulled over speeding because you're not going to talk. You're not going to talk your way. You're not going to talk away.
Sure, Kwik. You're going 90.
Right. I had to be a runner back in school, so I run, which is a lot of pressure when name is Kwik.
Yes.
But I remember I was preparing for a marathon, and I was reading a book on the preparation, the training of it, because I've never done it before. And I was looking at one of the chapters was the psychology. That's what I was very interested in because I'm a runner, so I feel good there, but I didn't. What was the mindset? And it said this in the first paragraph, verbatim, because I'm a memory expert. It said, your brain is like a supercomputer and your self-talk is a program it will run. So if you tell yourself you're not good at remembering names, you will not remember the name of the next person you meet because you program your supercomputer not to. Here's the thing.
Man, that is so powerful.
It is. Your brain is like a supercomputer and your self-talk is the program it will run. So if you tell yourself you're not good at remembering names, you will not remember the name of the next person you meet because you program your supercomputer not to. And what I always tell people is this: if you realized how powerful your thoughts, your words, your self-talk was, you wouldn't, if you didn't realize how powerful your brain and your mind was, you wouldn't say or think something you didn't want to be true. And I'll say that again because that's worth posting, tagging us both in it, is just, if you realized how powerful your mind was, you wouldn't say or think something you didn't want to be true. And because all thoughts become things. And it's not to say that if you have one bad negative thought, it's going to ruin your life any more than eating that donut we talked about would. But it's the consistency of it. Because our thoughts are that powerful. Our imagination is so powerful. They did this study. It's crazy. I was doing a talk in Sardinia. It's one of the blue zones, these handful of zones around the globe that have the most centurions, people living 100 and above. And I was doing a talk on longevity. And I quoted a study done by Ellen Langer out of Harvard University. In 1979, she was spending time at senior centers, much like I do. And she was like, this is not a really vibrant place to live your last days. And she did an experiment where she took 8 of the gentlemen out and put them into a redecorated monastery. So it wasn't 1979. She decorated as if it was 1959. And so these gentlemen got out of the van and they a lot of them had canes and they were kind of struggling to get into there, but they were told this, I want you to pretend it's 1959 again. So when they walked into their living quarters, they had television shows, black and white television shows from 1959. The cover of Time magazine was from 1959 with that current news. They took all the mirrors out of there so they couldn't see themselves. And they were told for just the next week, just pretend, live.
1959.
It's 1959. And before they put them in there, they tested their biomarkers. They tested their senses, their sense of sight, their sense of hearing. They tested their focus, their memory. They tested their strength, their physical strength. They took a picture of them before they went in. And then at the end of 7 days, they came back. And it was like that movie Cocoon. They were just like, it's so interesting. When they came back, they tested them. They were physically stronger. They had better eyesight. They had better sense of hearing. And cognitively, they had better focus and a better memory after just 7 days of living in that environment, listening to that music. Yep. And that's how powerful your mind is. And they also took a second picture of them when they came out. And a lot of them came out, they weren't using their canes or anything. It's like this. It's amazing. You could look at the study because they've replicated this in London, in the UK. They replicated in South Korea. But they took pictures of them and they showed the focus group before and after photos, and they said which one's the older photo, and they all thought it was the most recent photo because they actually looked younger also as well. Bingo. And that's the power of our thoughts. That's the power of our imagination. And what I would say is you control this. Right. And it's never going to be perfect. So the goal is not perfect. It's just progress, just like with our diet. It's never perfect. So many people are so stressed out with their diet, it cancels any positive effects it's having because they're so, you have so much anxiety around it. Same thing with your thoughts. Your thoughts, keep them as positive as possible. You want to be able to kill those ants. Now, how do you go about doing that is really the question, right? Yeah. So a couple of tools, and we've all heard these things before. So I'm just going to encourage you to do them.
Common sense to common practice.
Exactly. So here's here's the ways. So meditation is a powerful tool. I meditate twice a day for 20 minutes a day. And for me, it's not about becoming all Zen and going to different astral planes. Nothing about that. It's about me separating me. It's a training that allows me to know I'm not my thoughts, because people think that meditation is, my meditation coach, Emily Fletcher, just has a book called Stress Less, Accomplish More. I had her on my show and she's like, meditation, the enemy of meditation is not thought. You can't shut off your thoughts any more than you could shut off your heart beating. That your brain, that's what it's meant to do, just like your heart's meant to beat. So people don't meditate because they have this objection saying, oh no, I can't do it because I have all these thoughts. No, if you have thoughts, you're working. That's what's supposed to happen. The enemy is not thoughts. The enemy is actually effort. And so the goal here is for you to surrender and just see these thoughts come in and see them leave, because it helps you realize you are not your thoughts. And so there's a gap between stimulus and response where there's an infinite amount of possibility. And so meditation helps you to be able to separate you from those negative thoughts. Another thing that I would recommend is something that I call ABRA. Really simple technique. ABRA, again, 4 letters, A-B-R-A. The A stands for, you have a negative thought or you have some kind of pain or discomfort in your body. The A is you acknowledge it. Because a lot of times pain in our body or thoughts get louder and louder and louder because we're resisting it. And so this part of yourself is trying to amplify the pain. Or it's like a lot of times when I take cold baths, like I take cold showers or I take ice baths, I hate the cold. But I do it in the morning because I want to get myself to do difficult things. I want to be able to lower inflammation in my body, and that's cold therapy, right? It's just science. It's you hit your knee on the coffee table, you put ice on it because it reduces inflammation, it reduces swelling. Well, we have swelling, inflammation in our bodies that keep us from feeling joy and keep us from performing. So cold showers or cold baths allow you to do that. But like when I'm in an ice bath, with Wim Hof and everything, I hate it. But then also I feel like I'm in more pain and suffering because I'm trying to suppress it. But when I acknowledge it, I'm like, okay, then it doesn't have to scream, to get my attention. And so I feel like a lot of our negative thoughts, acknowledge them, because what you resist persists, right? If same thing with sales or anything else, that people just fight harder, and our unconscious will fight for those things also as well. So the A in ABRA stands for acknowledge it, don't fight it. And the B stands for breathe, because the way your autonomous nervous system that we have, right? We have this parasympathetic, sympathetic kind of state, and you want to spend as much time in parasympathetic because that's your rest, your digest, your repair, your recovery. Most people are just amped up all the time, which is really hard for them to be able to sleep and be able to perform. And that's why meditation, all these things are helping you to down-regulate and de-excite your nervous system. Breathing is a very powerful tool because it's something you do consciously and unconsciously. So it's unconscious. You always do it, but when we add conscious attention to it,
Yep.
it allows us to bridge that gap between the conscious and unconscious, if you will, metaphorically. And so breathing. So what I would do is, like, I have a negative thought. Oh, I'm not good at remembering names. I would fight it. I would acknowledge it. I wouldn't try to not think about it, because if I try not to think about it, I'm gonna think about it even more. And then I would just kind of breathe into that space where I feel like that thought is, or that pain is, right? Because breath is that powerful tool. And then the R is, I'll actually release. And what I mean is, when I'll breathe into that area of my body or that thought, and then on exhale, I'll release it. So I'll inhale limitlessness. I'll inhale possibility. I'll inhale, grace or wisdom, and then I'll exhale limitations. I'll exhale those complaints. I'll exhale like anything that's holding me back in the process. So that's where the release comes. If I have some kind of pain in my body, I'll breathe into that area, and then I'll just release it out. And then finally, the A in ABRA, the last A, stands for align. And align really is coming back to your truth, because a lot of times when we're in pain or we have negative thoughts, we're not integrated and aligned. We're not completely congruent. And I would align back to usually whatever the opposite is to what I was thinking or feeling.
Yes.
I would align back to my true nature.
Go back to what you want.
Exactly. Back and back to what I want, and back to what I am, what I truly am, in terms of who I really am. That's not buried underneath the opinions and expectations and all this other junk, right? And so, but my point in even just bringing this up, on a scale of 0 to 10, going back to this, how good is your diet? On a scale of 0 to 10, how much are you moving? On a scale of 0 to 10, how much are you getting, deep sleep? 0 to 10, how good is your peer group?
Yep.
And then finally 0 to 10, how many, how positive is our thoughts?
Yep.
And what's going on in there?
I just think of, remember Dr. Jose Silva mind control method? Like, I was so young, like I got this audio program sent to me from Nightingale Conant.
Cassette tapes.
Hey, Tom, check out this program. And I obsessed over it. The whole drunk monkey metaphor. Like, you would never let a drunk monkey loose in your house. Like why would you let your thoughts just go run free, right? Like, you have to learn to control them. The thing that I've used forever is stop. Right? Just, negative thought, just stop. And people are like, Why is that guy walking down the street talking to himself? And I'm like, the good news is now we all have headsets in, so no one cares.
Yeah, I know.
Right? But in the old days, when I'd be like, stop. And I was just telling my mind, okay, I've had enough of that. Time to move on.
Right.
And then get back to what I'm committed to.
And it's great because you're breaking that
breaking
cycle.
the pattern.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're interrupting it. And so that's really powerful. Even a word like yet is very powerful.
Yes.
I don't have a great memory, and just adding this word yet. Because it maintains the possibility of it. Words have, as you know, they really affect our brain, right?
Yes.
And how we process information. Even when people, going back to gratitude, people say all the time, I got to pick up the kids. I got to work out. Oh, I really got to meditate. Or I really got to journal. I got to make those sales calls. But you change your got to get. One little letter from an O to an E. Also, I get to pick up my kids today. I get to work out. I get to meditate. I get to make these calls and affect these lives in a positive way.
Yeah.
It feels just different. And emotion, when we're always coming back to it, the key, all learning is state dependent. And the key is, a lot of times, if you want a long-term memory, information is forgettable. But information times emotion becomes a long-term memory. And that state really makes a difference. Just like people don't buy logically, they buy emotionally, right? And they justify logically, because we're not logical, we're biological, everyone, right? Think about dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, all these neurotransmitters. We're this chemical soup. And how do we access that in ourselves and others? A great way of doing it is just through what we're talking about: power of imagination, the power of asking the right questions. That's how we elicit these feelings. And I would always come back to head, heart, hands. If you're self-sabotaging, if you're procrastinating, you're not doing something with your hands, even though you know it in your head, check in with that second H, which is your heart. Going back to start with why, Simon Sinek, right? Why are you here? What are the conversation you and I were having before this conversation about what's most important to you in life?
Exactly.
What's your purpose?
Exactly. Why are you on this planet?
Exactly. And who do you need to be today to be able to achieve that, right now? And I would challenge everybody to ask themselves those same questions.
So let's go. Let's hit the last one, and then I'm going to nail you with those 5 questions.
Okay,
I say nail like that's like I made it as a positive way. So we started this journey by saying, hey, I wanted to introduce you guys to Jim Kwik. I've been obsessing over him for a couple of years. Finally got him inside the studio. So pumped. This has been like, I'm like, you see me, I'm taking notes. Like I'm like, oh, that's a great arc of perspective. Yes. Shelf help versus self-help. The 3 things we want to talk: brain optimization. You crush that. The elimination of ants, on point. Let's give them some super learning tips.
Yeah, let's do it.
Around like retaining more information, memory being key, whether it's maybe it's just names. I have clients that literally can drive through a community and go, I sold that one to this person, that person, like they know every person and every big shout out to Tim Smith. Every house, every person, even if he didn't do a transaction with them, he knows the backstory of every one of them.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how do they get to that? Because that, when you meet with a client, is so powerful. They're like, you're the all-knowing knowledge broker.
Exactly.
You're the only person to work with when you have that base of information and knowledge.
Because it shows 2 things. It shows your competency and it shows your caring.
Yes.
Because, and it goes hand in hand. When somebody remembers not only, all these different listings, but they remember you, they remember your spouse's name, your kids' names, your birthday. It just shows that they care, that they're invested.
Yes.
And people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And we've heard this so many times, but when we forget somebody's name, like what's the message we send to somebody? That they don't matter, right? And that's not necessarily the case, but we haven't learned how.
Yep.
And that's it. So let's go into this.
How do we do names?
Let's unpack this. 3 keys for remembering anything. I want everyone just to remember MOM, and these are the foundations. And if you've watched videos of me on YouTube or Facebook or listened to a podcast, some of this is a little bit of repetition, but here's the thing that keeps you from mastery. It's saying, I know this already. You know what I mean? Oh, I know I should eat good food, or I know I got to move and work out, or I know I got to watch my peer group, and I know I got to sleep. But that's what robs you from like the things that you want in life, the goals, the desires, the fulfillment. It's hidden in the things that you're just not doing, right? And that's the thing. When you get yourself to do, if you're just doing the easy thing, which is procrastinating, then life is hard. But if you're doing the hard things in life, life gets a lot easier. So do the difficult things. So here are some things. 3 keys for a better memory. If you're ever forgetting something, one of these 3 things is missing, usually. The M. Most people say they have trouble remembering names. I would guarantee you 95% of people listening to this conversation would say, yeah, that's me. I meet somebody, get their name, it just disappears. As soon as the handshake breaks, the name just falls right through the ground. Or if it's not a short-term issue, it's a long-term. I'll be at the gym, somebody tapped me, I'll turn around, I'll see someone I recognize, but for the life of me, I don't know who that person is, right? So we know the name is the sweetest sound to a person's ears, right? And people, Maya Angelou said, people won't remember what you say, they won't remember what you did, they'll always remember how you made them feel, right? So let's get to this. You have trouble remembering names. If you're listening to this, you might agree with that. But let's say there was a suitcase here of $2 million cash for you or your favorite charity, tax-free, if you just remember the name of the next stranger you meet. Tom, who's going to remember that person's name?
Every single person on the planet.
Exactly. So why is every single person listening now a memory expert all of a sudden? Because as your brain coach, I'm going to call you on your BS. It's not true that you can't remember names, right? Because you just did. You know you can remember. Because here's the thing. You don't remember all names, but you certainly don't forget all names.
No.
And genius leaves clues. So find out the method behind the magic, and you usually remember names because the M is you're motivated. So that's the M in mom. You're motivated to remember your name because you remember people who could be good for your business. You remember somebody who could, you're attracted to. There's motivation that's there. And so my thing is, if it's there when you remember a name, why not install that? So why not install it using the tool of questions? Questions are the answer. Ask yourself, why do I want to remember this person's name? I literally, like when people see me do this in front of an audience, I'll have all these people stand up and then sit down when I call their name. But ask yourself, why do you want to train yourself? Because if you, maybe it's to show the person respect. Maybe it's to make a new friend. Maybe it's to do some business. Maybe it's to practice these things that I learned on this podcast. Because if you can't come up with one reason, what's going to happen? You won't. Because reasons reap results. Going back to the reasons, starting with why. If you don't have a reason, you're not going to get the results. So ask yourself, simple. So what's the technique? When you're meeting somebody, ask yourself, take a moment. Why do I want to remember the person's name? And you bring intention there. The O in mom stands for observation. observation. A lot of people, they blame their retention. It's not your retention, it's you paying attention.
Yes.
And the art of memory is the art of attention. And I remember the second time got to meet President Bill Clinton, and we were at a charity event. We only met one time a couple years before, and it was very brief. But I was sitting down at my table. I was the first one there, assigned at this table. Then to the right of me sits Forrest Whitaker, and I'm such a big Forrest Whitaker fan. And next to him was Richard Branson, and then Ashton Kutcher, Ashton Kutcher's twin brother, and I didn't know he even had a twin brother. And then President Clinton sits right next to me. And I'm like, you took a picture of that.
Yeah.
I had to put it on Instagram because people are like, who photoshopped that Asian dude in that photo? But I put the picture up there, and that's what most people were saying. But when I sat with him, he remembered my name.
Yes.
And I was really impressed. And I was just like, okay, so he knew who's sitting at this table. So somebody fed him that information. Then he picks up on the last conversation we had. And I was just like, okay, nobody was listening to that. Nobody fed him that information. And here's the thing, when he's talking to me, I was like, I'm a memory guy. I was like, how do you do this? What do you do? And he tells me this story about his grandfather in Arkansas gathering the children in the living room and would tell stories. But afterwards, he would do something different. He would really deeply quiz every single one of them to see if they were paying attention. Mm-hmm. And I was interesting when he was telling me all this. I was noticing he was talking to me. It was an eerie feeling in a positive way, but also a little bit scary because he was focused right on me. When you go to events, sometimes you don't have that person's focus. You can tell they're looking over your shoulder.
Yeah, they're out here.
Who's more important in this room? Who's walking? Yeah. Or if they're not looking around, they're inside their own mind.
Yeah.
They're not listening. They're waiting for their turn to speak.
Bingo.
Or they're thinking about how they're going to reply and respond. And we know Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Another habit is seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Yes.
And not so much about being interesting, but more interested about somebody. And I noticed he was just fixated on me when he's telling me these stories. And he has this very powerful presence, right? And I think his incredible, he's got charisma, he's got great connector, he's a great communicator. But I think his incredible memory and his powerful presence with people comes from being powerfully present with people. I'll say that again, that his incredible memory and his powerful presence comes from being powerfully present. And that's something that's not reserved to him or anybody else. We could just be present with people.
That's a learned skill.
Exactly. And that's something that comes through intention.
Yeah.
And then just think about what I'm talking about, the M and the O, motivation and observation. Motivation is just caring about a person to remember them. Observation is just being present with them. I mean, this is just a good recipe for being a good human being.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's what I feel like, without even getting to the last M stands for the mechanics. But going back to presence, it's just listening to the person, right? If everyone just mentally wrote the word listen in their mind and did this little brain exercise, move the letters around, it spells another word perfectly, listen. It spells the word silent. And I'm just saying, just be silent with somebody, just be there with somebody. Mm-hmm. And those two things, if people, even in sales, if people feel motivated, they know, their motivations, they feel like that person cares for them and that they're present with them. I mean, that's more than half of it.
Yes.
But the last M stands for the mechanics. And those are the tactics, those are the strategies, those are the skills on how to learn another language, how to read 3 times faster, how to remember names, how to do all these things. So one of the things I do in business is I talk about, to remember names, is be suave, B-E suave. And so the B, I love acronyms, obviously, because remember back in school, we learned Roy G. Biv.
Of course.
The Great Lakes are homes, Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, Superior. So very memorable, be suave. So next time you're at your next event or you're meeting somebody for the first time, you're looking in the mirror, checking your makeup or checking your outfit, what you're wearing, say, I'm going to be suave. And then the B stands for believe. Because as we talked about, if you believe you can, believe you can't, either way you're right. Henry Ford said that. And so believe that you can do that. This is possible, right? The E is exercise, and I don't mean physical exercise, but although we talked about that, people who are more physically active do better on mental acuity tests. Yep. People who are more physically active, they'll have better focus and creativity, all these, and memory and so on. What's good for your heart is good for your head again. But I mean exercise as in practice, because practice makes progress. Practice makes permanent, right? Mm-hmm. And so I would say practice this, because the bad news is it takes effort. The good news, not as much as you think. I mean, I'm very good at remembering names, but after the first 60 days of doing this, I don't get, once you know how to park a car, or once you know how to be able to type, you know how to do it.
Pilot.
It's a skill, like anything.
Yep.
And so that's my thing, is there's no such thing as a good or bad memory. There's a trained memory and an untrained memory. And this is just, you're doing skill acquisition, right? So 21, 30, 66 days, whatever you buy into creating a new habit. There's a way of accelerating that we teach. But the idea is consistency, because consistency compounds, and little by little, a little becomes a lot. Just do a little bit each day, and then you get better and better and better. And then that's where the speed and the confidence comes. There's a psychology, there's a confidence loop, that the more confident, if you could play like Tiger Woods, you'd be more confident, and then you play more and you get more confident, and so on. So that's positive momentum. So I would say exercise, meaning practice these strategies. The suave, S is you say the name. You meet someone for the first time and you say, Tom, it's great to meet you. The reason why you say it is you want to make sure, going back to the O, that you observed it correctly.
Yes.
Because lots of times we're at networking functions, or we're at a wedding, it's loud. You don't want to say goodbye, Todd, when the person's name is Tom, right? You want to get corrected up front. So you say the name. The U in suave stands for use the name. Now, you want to use it, not abuse it. So, because Tom, it's so great to be here today. Tom, what do you want to cover today? Tom, do you want to get some lunch here?
It becomes annoying, right?
Exactly.
You're like, cheap memory trick.
Exactly. So you want to use it 3 or 4 times in the context of the conversation, because the repetition does help to you get that auditory memory, right? So you want to use it. The A in suave, this is a powerful one, is ask. Ask. Because what's everyone's favorite subject?
Themselves.
Exactly. It's not entrepreneurship, and it's not property. It's not travel. It's themselves.
Yeah.
And this is a great tactic, a usable, practical tactic you could do when you meet somebody who has a name you haven't heard before.
Yes.
So you meet someone named Afzal, you meet someone named Rudiger, you maybe haven't heard before. What can you ask about a person's name?
Hey, what's the origin of that?
Yeah, exactly. What's
cool
the
name.
origin?
What's the origin? Where are you from?
Yeah, where are you from?
Yep.
How do you spell it? Who are you named after? You know, what does it mean?
Yes.
I remember I was doing a training for the country's largest life insurance company, and there was about 100-something people in the room, and the training director's name was Nankita. And I was like, wow, that's a beautiful name. How do you spell it? Where is it from? And I was like, what does it mean? And she paused. I was like, what does it mean? And she looked at our coworkers, and she says it means graceful falling waters. And I was like, yeah. And her coworkers, had the same kind of reaction, right? And based on that, I was like, wait a second. How long have you worked here, Nikita? She was like 4 or 5 years with a lot of these people. Yeah, a lot of good friends here at my wedding. I'm like, that's interesting. I was like, to the audience, I was like, raise your hand if you knew that's what her name meant. Out of 100-something people, how many people raised their hand?
I'm guessing 0.
Yeah, nobody knew that's what her name is. And if a name is the sweetest, and that was like a 10-year client. Yes. I'm not saying it was just, but just remembering somebody's name, again, it's like, thinking about we talk about information times emotion is a long-term memory. Think about the emotion associated with your name. It's probably one of the first words you learn how to spell. Think about whether your parents loved you, how much love and cheering you got from to be able to do it, kind of crappy, right? But you still you attach that emotion to your name. And so I would say, going back to this, ask about a person's name, and especially if this name you haven't heard before, and it's the sweetest sound to their ears, and they'll love it. Then finally, the V and the E in suave. The V is visualize. And what I mean by that is, I bet people who are listening to this that they're better with faces than they are with names. Mm-hmm. You go to somebody, you say, I remember your face, but I forgot your name.
Yes.
You never go to somebody and say the opposite. You never go to someone and say, I remember your name, but I forgot your face. That wouldn't even make any sense, right? But here's the thing. We tend to remember what we see because our visual cortex is larger in our brain. There's a Chinese proverb that goes, what I hear, I forget. What I see, I remember. What I do, I understand. What I hear, I forget. I heard the name, I forgot the name. What I see, I remember. I saw the face, I remember the face. And what I do, going back to exercise, practice makes the progress, right? And so knowing that if you tend to remember what you see, then try seeing what you want to remember. And this is an easy mnemonic, fun game you'd play. When you meet somebody, you take their name and you pretend it's Pictionary. Remember, you have to try to get the person to say the word without just by making pictures or sound alike. You draw an ear. So if a person's name is Mark, you just imagine for a split second when you're, shaking their hand that you're putting a little check mark on their forehead. And you're like, Jim, that's so childish. But who really are the fastest learners?
Kids.
I mean, they're so
Kids.
playful,
Yes.
right? But and that's the key for learning is that play and that curiosity, and they ask questions. And they have a sense of wonder, right? And children, when I said play the other day, it's like I don't play anymore because I'm older. I was like, no, actually, I think you grew older because you stopped playing. Because it's a mindset. So you have to be playful here and use the power of your imagination, because that's really, one of our ultimate superpowers. Because especially where jobs are going. I mean, jobs are going to 3 A's. Artificial intelligence. This is not even disputed. Mm-hmm. Artificial intelligence can take a lot of jobs. Automation.
Yep.
Think about all the software and computers are what they're able to do. And then Asia, meaning it's being outsourced,
yes.
right? And so what makes us inherently valuable as human beings is the power of our mind. And I would double down on things like creativity, your ability to solve problems.
Yep.
I would double down on things like strategy, right? And I would double down on imagination.
Yes.
Because imagination is what, like you and many of your listeners have done. You take the invisible that's in your mind and then you make it visible.
Yes.
Right? I mean, that's leadership, and using the power of imagination and having vision, shared vision in a culture. It's extremely powerful. So I would say that, these kind of things we're talking about are exercising your creativity, exercising your imagination, exercising your strategy, because these are, here's the biggest takeaway. All right. You ready for the biggest takeaway for this conversation? Your life changes when you take nouns and you turn them into verbs, meaning we hypnotize ourselves with our language by our self-talk, saying things like, "Oh, I don't have focus today. I don't have motivation. I don't have creativity.
I'm tired."
Right, exactly. But these are things that people say that they have. But these aren't things you have. These are things you do.
Bingo.
You don't have energy. You do energy. You do things that give you energy, the thoughts, the physiology, the foods.
Yep.
You don't have motivation, you do motivation. You don't have focus, you do focus. You don't have creativity, you do creativity. You don't even have a memory, you do a memory. Literally, you create new connections and reinforce connections, and you encode it, you store it, and then you retrieve it. There's a process. And so my goal is always showing people the process of how to do these things, but you can never do those things if you believe they're static and they're fixed. You either have it or you don't. You wake up and say, "Oh, I hope I have drive today," or "I hope I have, creativity so I could write and make videos today." That doesn't make a lot of sense.
No.
And so the goal is, when the benefit of turning into a verb, it gives you agency and gives you your sovereignty back, because it gives you the power to do something, as opposed to being on the effect and you're back at being a thermometer again.
Yes.
And so going back to this for visualization, what you're doing is you're taking someone's name like Mike, and all of a sudden you take a split second and just imagine them jumping on the table, singing karaoke on a microphone, right? And it's really silly, but it's just that's what uses our senses, our imagination, and when we remember it better than something else. And even if when it doesn't work, it still works, because it gets you to focus, number one, on the person.
Bingo.
And it gets you to focus on the name.
Create an association.
Because you don't, exactly.
Yes.
Because here's the reason. Here's the villain in this scenario. You have to overcome what I call the 6-second rule. The 6-second rule is somebody tells you something, or like their name. You have 6 seconds to do something with that information. Otherwise, your short-term memory, your working memory is just going to discard it.
Yes.
Right. So by trying to take that name, turn it into a picture, it forces you to look at the person. It forces you to think about, originally on that, observe that person. So that gives you an original observation on that. And so if the person's name is Mary, you meet Mary, imagine you're getting married, or imagine she's carrying 2 lambs, like Mary had a little lamb.
Yes.
I meet someone named Bob, and I think that person's in a split second bobbing for apples. I meet someone named Rich, and he has got all this kind of money in his pocket, right? Tom, so everybody has something.
Yes.
For David, I use a slingshot because of David and Goliath, right? So I have these kind of, someone's name's Carol, imagine them Christmas caroling or something like that. And so it gives you something to do. And then when you're at an event and you see the 20 people, you see all these images, and when you're saying goodbye to this woman, you're like, "Oh, she was wearing the bride's dress," or she was wearing, she's carrying the lambs. What's her name? Mary. Yeah. And then once you know the information, you work with Mary, you've had a couple meetings, her name's Mary, then the picture disappears.
Yep.
Because they're a means to an end. It was just meant to hold it there to keep your imagination, creativity, your strategy here. And then once you know the end result, then the picture disappears. It's to overcome the 6-second rule. So that's V. So person's name is to visualize. Person's name is John. You could picture whatever you think of when you think of John. But finally, the E in suave stands for end. end. And what I mean by that, just like how at the beginning you say the name in the beginning, you end with the name. Meaning if you could walk into a room of 20 strangers and leave saying goodbye to every single one of them by name, then who are they all going to remember?
1000% you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's
Like that, he's so cool.
Yeah.
What is it about that guy?
Absolutely.
We love her.
And that makes you unforgettable.
Of course.
Because that's the other thing. It's not just what you know. Yes, you can learn faster using these strategies.
Yes.
And yes, you want to be an expert at your field and in your market, but it's also who you know, but it's not just who you know, it's who knows you. And that's what it means by being unforgettable, showing at a level of caring, at a level of presence, at a level of skill.
I'd add an E to all of your A's on the superpowers of humans going forward, and that is empathy. Empathy. So let's wrap it with, this has been insanely great. We're like, how much time is it going to take? Like, it's going to take as long as it takes, right? So this is perfect. I mentioned to you before we got started that I've had a lot of mentors, I know as you have as well. And one of my mentors is this guy named Mike Vance, who I've talked about a lot. I wrote about him in my second book. He was the one that when I asked, Mike, man, you worked with Walt Disney. You were friends with, you talked to Mother Teresa once a month, and that call usually was right after a call with Jack Welch, right? So he was, like you're talking to Neutron Jack, and then, like take over the world and save the world, like in an hour, right? Wow. He was side by side with Steve Jobs from the origin of Apple all the way through until Steve's death. Arguably, Walt Disney called him the most creative man in the world. Like he said, like, wow, that is his superpower. And like coming from a guy like Walt Disney, like that's pretty insane. Made him his business card at Walt Disney when he was there was he's in charge of ideas and people. Like just come up with good ideas, help people. Like how much fun would that job be, right? For a person like Walt Disney. When I met with him, I was at a transition in my life. It was 2001. It was pre 9/11, and I was just in this place, like, what am I doing? Do you know what I mean? Like every listener has been there before. Like I've been working, I've been raising a family, but like the outside looked successful, but inside I wasn't feeling right. Right? So I checked all the boxes of quote unquote success, but internally I was in conflict. So I reached out to Mike and I said, hey, I'd love to come see you. And many people have heard this story before, where I listed all these questions in my journal and I only got to one question. I said, Mike, you worked with Mother Teresa. You helped Steve Jobs. You worked with Jack Welch when he was in the choo-choo division of GE. That was the way he described it. You were Walt Disney's right-hand guy. You invented the salad bar. You coined the term think outside of the box. You did all these insanely great things. I'm like, what did all those people have in common? And he said, Tom, they all answered the 5 fundamental questions and they lived by them.
Wow.
And I literally flip in my journal and I'm like,
this is it.
What are the 5 questions? It took me a year and a half to really get clear on the 5. Okay. But I want to challenge you because you're just an extraordinary dude. So you ready?
Okay,
question number 1.
Is everyone going to do this with us too?
Everybody that's listening has to answer these questions. Question number 1, why are you on this planet? What is your purpose?
Okay. So I grew up as the boy with the broken brain. So my purpose is to build better, brighter brains. It really is. It's not $1 billion. It's 1 billion brains. No brain left behind.
Yeah.
And I really do believe that our passion is what lights us up. So what lights me up is learning. But purpose is how we use that passion to light up other people. And so that's teaching people how to learn.
I love it. Question number 2. It's like you and I, but like, first of all, everyone listening, he knew the answer. If you're sitting here right now and you have not taken the time to figure out why in the world am I on this planet? Yeah. It is so, you forget like how many people have said, the biggest, most important thing in life is figuring out what your purpose is. Like, why are you on this planet? Like Buddha, and I totally, destroyed that version of his quote, but everyone knows. The second question he said to me was, what do you value? Like, what are your values? So if I said to you just, Jim, what are the top 5, 6, 7 things? Like, what do you value?
Love in order. My values are what I value most in life. Love, growth, contribution, adventure. Those are like 4 solid for me. Yeah. So love, I'll do anything for my family and my friends. Yeah. Because I believe that's why we're here, is that connection that we have. Growth, I want to be able to grow because the next value I have is so I have more to contribute. and that used to be a little reversed because I put contribution over, other things. And then I realized that I was martyring myself. I didn't have enough. My cup was empty.
Yeah.
So I grow. So love, family, friends, our community, growth. And then so I have more to contribute. And then the last one I added recently, just the past couple of years, is adventure, meaning I want to have fun in the process.
Yes.
This is something that, we're here. And my message, for people is just, we have one life. We're here. It's just like, why aren't we running towards our dreams like we're on fire?
Yes.
And so there's an urgency to that, but I also want to enjoy that process also as well. Great question.
I love it. Okay, question number 3, he looked at me and he giggled and he said, they all know what their God-given talents are there. Like they all know. And I would say, for you, like it's pretty obvious, like what's your superpower, Jim?
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting because while it's learning and teaching, those weren't, I think they're inherent in all of us.
I agree.
But they were definitely earned.
Yes.
Like I people realized how much work I put into it. But I really think when it comes down to it, I think empathy is really strong. Like I believe that there's a gift in every struggle.
Yeah.
And me growing up, my 2 biggest struggles were learning and public speaking. Like I would do a book report, but if a teacher asked me to present in front of class, I would give my heart and soul in that book report, but I would be so terrified to get in front of a group because when you feel like you're broken, you become very introverted and shy and closed down.
Yep.
And I didn't want the spotlight. So I would actually lie and say I didn't do the book report. And after the class left, I would throw it out in the trash along with everything else. So learning and public speaking were my biggest challenges, which is the universe has a sense of humor because that's what I do every day of my life is public speak on this thing called learning.
Yes.
But I've learned to ask myself when I'm broken sitting in those classrooms when I'm 5, 6, 7 years old, I didn't like to see people suffer. And so I would say the gift, if it was something that was there early on, was empathy, meaning I could feel what other people are feeling because I know what it feels like to not be good enough, to feel like you're broken, and I could identify suffering. And what drives me to do, even though I'm sometimes painfully shy and I'm very introverted, I do what I do because if I know something that could help somebody with their suffering, then shame on me for not helping them. And so I feel like a moral obligation to do this work, and that became my life's work.
Yes.
So I would say empathy, and that led me to learning and teaching and everything else like that.
That's beautiful. Question number 4, he said to me, I remember I said, so what do all these people have in common? He said, they all decided exactly how their life was going to be, the impact they were going to make, right? And you know the story of Mother Teresa, like she was invited by the church, we want to shower you with gold and put you in, robes of silk. And she's like, I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, I'm not going, right? Like if you read her biography and everyone that wrote about her. So his thing was, so Jim, it's 20 years from now. How is the world experiencing you?
Oh, well, hopefully I'm still here.
You better be. You better be.
And what I would say is the ripple effect, I believe, to raise the collective intelligence and wisdom and potential. I believe the ultimate quest that we're all on is to reach, to reveal, to realize our fullest potential. I think that's why we're here. So if I could be a conduit for that, the reason why I focus on the mind is because I feel like we're in the millennium of the mind, that we have all the answers in us already. And that if somebody is, with technology, it's amazing, Tom, that there could be a child listening to this right now, and they could be in a third world country listening to this on their phone, and they could learn a couple of things, and they could become the next Nelson Mandela, Malala, Elon Musk, or whatever, and they could solve some of the big challenges, Mother Teresa, and they're inspired to do so. And I like that kind of world because I believe in the butterfly effect. 20 years from now, like all of us, butterfly flaps its wings here and it can create a tsunami halfway across the globe because of systems and complex systems and this ripple effect. And I believe everyone who's listening right now, what an amazing, as us all flapping our metaphorical wings, what we could do over 20 years in terms of making this planet a better place. And I feel like when I talk about superheroes, a superhero is somebody who not only discovered and developed their superpowers, and I believe we all have superpowers, not shooting lasers out of our eyes and leaping tall buildings, but we have unique abilities. We have talents. We have skills. But just having a superpower doesn't make you a superhero. You have to use that power to serve. And so I feel like everybody who's listening are modern day superheroes, and we just have to step up to be able to do what we can to make the world a better place, because we grow, so we have more to be able to contribute. So in 20 years, I would love to be part of that. Just one more butterfly that made a difference.
That's beautiful, man. That's so beautiful. The last question he asked me was, he said they all basically decided who they wanted to be. Mm-hmm. And he's like, we remember, it was the first time I saw somebody write down be, do, have, right? Versus the do, have, be, right? Yeah. The old model of the world, he said, everybody thinks they got to do a lot to one day have a lot. So someday they could be happy,
or be
satisfied, be successful, whatever. And he said, if you just start with the right being choice.
Yeah.
He said, I don't know if any of them were like conscious to it, like in the moment that they were deciding this. He said, but you know the story of Walt Disney, you know the story of Steve Jobs. These are all super well documented. At a certain point, they flipped the switch, just like you did. You had this moment where you're like, I'm not that kid with a broken brain. So the question is there anything different in terms of who you would be 20 years from now than you are today?
I think that's a great question. And I remember we had this whole conversation, a lot of it was power of questions on our life, and seek and you ask and you shall receive. What I would say, my answer would be, I feel like the reason we have struggles is it helps us to reveal who we really are. That it's not about necessarily adding more things. It's kind of getting rid of the noise that's not us. Meaning that people talk about post-traumatic stress, and it's real. And I've had a number of experiences. We all have had loss and challenges, but challenges could change us in a positive way. And there's actually something called post-traumatic growth. People don't realize this, but a lot of people, I'm sure, could relate that you've went through some really hard times. You wouldn't wish it upon anybody, but you also wouldn't change it, because you found a strength, you found a meaning, you found a life's purpose or a mission for yourself, and you were better off because of it. And I feel like we're always going to have challenges, and that difficult times, they could define us, they could diminish us, or they could develop us. And ultimately, the through line is we decide always. And so I feel like that who I want to be, that I'm working for every single day, putting in the work for, is not only doing things to be, we all know what to do, right? And then so I would say is a lot of people feel burnt out or they're tired because they're doing too much. But I feel like it's because, again, we're doing too little, the things that light us up, that spark our fire. And what I would say is, for me, it's a revealing process, and that who I want to be 20 years from now is still the same core person, but with less of the stuff, because we're all on this journey, and life, just like learning sometimes, is messy.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to clear this noise and just really reveal who we truly are at a core. And I think a lot of us will come back to that place and find that we're home. I don't want to get too metaphysical about things, but I feel like you are who you are, and our decisions every single day, lead us to that. And, in addition to waking up with your to-do list, wake up with the to-be list. And when you're going through crisis, don't ask yourself what I need to do at this moment. Ask, who do I need to be at this moment? Maybe it's to be creative, be committed, be confident. And I feel like the universe will make room for you, for sure.
Dude, you are a blessing. I am so grateful for you. This interview has been, I could have 25 pages of notes.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, from everybody in my community, right? Obviously, they're going to know where to follow you, and they absolutely should do that. I just want to thank you. I just want to thank you for moving through your issues and then being a voice of reason for so many people on the planet that get stuck and now see that there is a possibility, right? I was talking to a buddy of mine before I got here, and I said, hey man, what was your win this week? And he said, on Sunday, I did a 20-mile bike ride with a blind woman, right? She's in tandem with her partner. And she's like, Dan, tell me where Catalina is right now. And he's like, it's over your right shoulder. And he said, it was just that question from this woman who's, by the way, former military, had a massive brain injury, went blind, And she said, hey, he's like, why are you asking about Catalina? And she said, because I'm going to paddle from like, Santa Monica to Catalina next weekend.
Amazing.
And he was just like, dude, like, that's the world. Like, that's what's possible for people. And I tell that because you bring out that possibility in others. And for that, I'm grateful.
I appreciate you. I started this conversation saying, appreciate what you do, but not only what you do, but the manner that you do it. And I also appreciate everyone who's listened all the way to the end here, because that says something about them. I don't believe a lot of coincidences, but I feel like there's reasons that like attracts like, and that we're all on this path together. And really the nature of what we do is about transcending. Mm-hmm. It's about ending this transcend, and this mass hypnosis through marketing and media that says somehow we're broken, that somehow that we're not enough, through these lies. And so I feel like who we are is so much more than sometimes what we're demonstrating, because we buy into that same thing. And that my message to everybody is, I was outside kind of meditating right before I came in. It's a beautiful day out. And I was looking at this bird in this tree, and I'm like, wow. And I'm not really great with heights, but I'm like, if I was up there, I'd be really nervous and scared if I was up in that tree. And I realized that bird, it's calm and it's confident, not because it places its trust in the tree branch, but because it places its trust in its own wings. Yep. And I'm here to say, everybody who's listening to this, you have wings. And as entrepreneurs, sometimes we jump off and we have to build those wings on the way down, but nonetheless that they're there, and that we have greatness, we have genius inside. And now is the time to be able to let that out, because the world needs it.
100%. All right, guys. There's just so much here.
Yes,
Share this with like 500 people.
I would challenge everybody. Because here's what I would challenge people as your coach. I would challenge everybody right now to take, because you have to take immediate action, because knowledge is not power, it's potential power.
Yes.
I would take a screenshot of this episode or of this video, and I would post it. But the reason why you post it is because when you teach something, the ultimate accelerated learning technique is learn to teach. Because when you learn something, you could write it down, you take notes, and you ask questions. But when you have to teach it, you have to know it even better. Yep. And when you teach something, you get to learn it twice. Yep. And so when you post it, the reason why is what I love to see is sharing just one nugget, just one idea you got from this conversation, or one new action that you're going to take because of it. And then tag Tom, tag me. Mine is at Jim Kwik, Kwik, as long as you spell it right. And I'll actually repost some of my favorites also as well. I do the same all the time. Because I believe that you need to be active, because 20th century education, where we're sitting in class being lectured to, it's very passive. It's like, but the human brain doesn't learn through consumption. It learns through creation and creativity. So I would say create something, new, and own it so you can integrate it. Take a screenshot, tag us both, and then post in the description your big aha. And, exactly. I want to know that.
Something around brain optimization, something about ants, something about super learning and memory, any one of those things. And by the way, again, I also agree, when you share it, you're throwing that pebble into everybody else's pond and creating a positive ripple effect, right? Yeah. Everybody needs these skills in this time, right? So I love that thought. So, dude, I could spend all day. I know we both have other schedules. So thank you so much. And for everybody listening and watching, we love you. Thank you so much. Remember, always your strategy matters. And now more than ever, your passion absolutely rules. If you want more information about this episode, including my show notes, mentions, links, and everything else, make sure you visit tomferry.com/podcast. That's tomferry.com/podcast. Thanks again, and talk to you soon.